Welcome, everyone, to a new edition of Draft on Tap. My name is Aldo Gandia. And again, we have got football coverage every night this week and into next week. It is going to be loaded with fantastic content, starting with Greg Gabriel on 11 a.m. Central Monday morning, and he will have about 3 or 4 shows next week. And of course, Danny and I will be on multiple times, all covering the NFL draft from the Chicago Bears perspective. And then one other house note here, I want to wish good luck and congratulations to Ross Reed and Evan McLean of the Mac and Reed Show. They are off taking their show to Second City Gridiron, and many, many thanks for all the hard work that they have done here at the Barroom Network. I'll keep you posted once they've landed and got their new show at that site. I will share that information with you on some of our future shows. All right, let me bring in Danny. Danny Shimon, how are you, brother? Danny is frozen. Danny is unfrozen now. There you go.
I wasn't frozen on my end, so I was like, I'm frozen. But anyway, getting down the stretch here and getting excited. A week from tomorrow night, you and I will be on here and watching the Bears count down, and we'll see if they may stay at number 10, if they move up, move down, and it'll be a fun night. Obviously, all 3 days will be fun for us. Well, at least for me. I know a lot of the fans look forward for the first couple of days, but all 3 days are exciting, and you see the culmination of all these work that these young kids have done and put in terms of their college careers, and then obviously then the postseason, all-star games, and the combine, and the pro days, and the visits, and it all comes to fruition for them on next weekend. So it's fun times. It's exciting. The Bears are going to be collecting some new talented players, hopefully, and then we'll be here to talk about it. Like I said, you'll see these mugs a lot next week, whether you like it or not.
That's right. And you and I did a taping the other night called Day 3 Gems, and you identified 9 players that you think will be gems on Day 3, if the Bears can land one or multiple of those players. And we'll be talking about that more. But I just want to mention that because that video is now housed over on Danny's YouTube channel, which is at Shimon Draft Scout. And we'll be posting it on our network here after a couple of days of its simmering over on Danny's channel. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to talking to you further about that after our interview, because we're going to have fun tonight with this gentleman. He is PJ Acosta, or JP Acosta. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. We got a week left till the NFL draft. It's tiring, but we're almost there. We're almost to the finish line. I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about it.
Hey, I noticed over at SB Nation where you write that you've been going by the name of Joseph Acosta now. Is that like a professional decision not to use JP?
My mom gave me the phone call and was like, hey, I gave you this name, and I know you like to use a nickname, but we use JP Joseph interchangeably.
There you go. Hey,
what mom says, man, it goes. So I wouldn't.
Mom, if you're listening, I will use Joseph on my writing.
I love it. Well, I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and I'll let you and Danny talk football for 15 minutes, and then I'll come back with chat questions and some more of my own. But my first question to you is, you recently had a chance to talk to Ashton Jeanty, and I'd like to know what you learned from him, and were you more impressed with him after you chatted with him, or was it about the same, that he just sort of meet expectations?
I think that I'm more impressed coming away from the interview, but it's also crazy to say that because I have such a high bar. I think so highly of Ashton Jeanty that he still managed to surpass my expectations. He's such a thoughtful person. You know, when I asked him about why he chose to stay at Boise State instead of entering the transfer portal, going to a bigger school, and trying to get his name even more out there at bigger schools, he was like, I'm here for the relationships. I'm here to be built into a person, not just a football player. And I think that's something that's incredibly profound, because he put a lot of faith, a lot of trust in a first-year head coach with a new quarterback in an offense where, if you watch from 2023 to 2024, it's different players, and his role changed a lot. So I think it showed off a lot of his thoughtfulness, but also we had a lot of fun. I asked him what his favorite food he ate during the draft process was. He said he went to Louisiana, had some fried catfish over rice, and I was like, you know what, I can get behind that one. And then, of course, asked him what his favorite touchdown runs were. But he's truly an impressive individual just to talk to.
Yeah, before Danny jumps in, do you think he can become a transcendent type NFL back, one worthy of a top 10 selection?
I think so. And I think when this actually came up when I was talking with Ashton, is his most underrated trait that he says, and I also think it's his most underrated trait, is his receiving ability.
Right.
He didn't catch the ball a lot in 2024 because he was running everybody over. But in 2023, he led all FBS running backs in receiving yards, led all FBS running backs in yards per route run. He was doing legit receiver stuff out of the backfield. He has that addition to his arsenal, along with being just the most dynamic player when he has the ball in his hands. It adds another layer to his overall value as a running back. I think we do a lot of the running back value. Don't draft a guy in the top 10. But when you look at who and where the NFL has gone in terms of affecting the run game and running backs being super effective as runners and receivers, Ashton Jeanty is the latest addition to that. I think he combines such a strong lower body and core to just kind of bounce off of tacklers with impressive vision that makes him really good in zone or gap schemes. So I think he's such a versatile prospect that even if he does not reach his ceiling, which everybody said, like LaDainian Tomlinson, Maurice Jones-Drew, even if he doesn't reach that, he's still going to be a really serviceable, really quality player, because he has so much versatility they can bring to an offense.
Outstanding. Danny, he's all yours.
Yeah, JP, once again, or Joseph, I just wanted to, I don't want to get the mom mad. I'll make sure mom's cool with me. I just want to thank you again for taking some time to join us tonight. Obviously, Aldo said, we've had you on a couple of times, and it's been a joy to talk to you. So let's dive into it, man. We said it, 8 days left, a week from tomorrow. A lot of lives will be changed. A lot of young men, all their hard work and everything will come to fruition here next week. So, the draft, obviously we're a Bear-centric podcast here, and Jeanty is we'll stay there with Jeanty here. And he's been a hot topic here in Chicago locally. A lot of fans, want to see the Bears, if he's there at 10, plug Jeanty. A lot of fans are talking about trading up and getting Ashton Jeanty. There's talk about, you can take, I'm one of them here. You can take just a deep running back class. You can get a running back in the second and third round in this class. Not as good as obviously Ashton's my top running back, but still you can be productive. But in terms of talking, with Jeanty and in terms of where he sees himself going, obviously if you look at every mock draft, he's going 6 to the Raiders. So, but mocks are called mocks for a reason. Does he have a feel in terms of where he may or may not go? And if so, if not, do you have a feel in terms of where you think he could go?
So when I talked to him, he didn't really have a feel for where he was going to go. There was no likely spot. He had said he had visited with almost every team in the top 10. He had mentioned traveling to all these different cities and going to seeing these different people is his favorite part of the draft process. But for me, I think his draft range starts at 5 at Jacksonville, and I think it could go all the way to like 20 in Denver. It just depends on how high and how valuable you think a running back is. So for Chicago, in the Bears' perspective, the reason Ashton Jeanty is a great pick is because you want to widen the margin for error for your young quarterback. I always like to talk about NFL offenses, especially with younger quarterbacks, in terms of margin for error. You want to make sure that if he messes up, the mess up isn't catastrophic. So where if he's a little bit off on a pass, it's not an interception. If he's a little bit late, it's not a sack. He's not put into so many third and longs, like 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 10s. We saw a lot of that with Caleb Williams in his rookie year. And I think Ashton Jeanty would play a really big role in that, especially with how much the Bears revamped, retooled their offensive line going into the offseason. It feels like just adding that piece in a Bears offensive room that kind of needs a little bit more consistency from their running back room, it will make a lot of sense there at 10. But I also think there are a lot of different options for where they can go. I think the Bears are in a great spot where they can get some of the talent that starts to trickle down after the top teams really start to pick. I think a guy like Shamar Stewart would be somebody that Dennis Allen absolutely loves. I'm a huge fan of the guy. 6'5", 270. He played at 290 at Texas A&M because he was playing the 4-eye, but you can see the freakish blend of size, speed, power. I think he needs a little bit more help finishing plays, but when you talk about a guy who can become a dynamic multi-layered threat as a pass rusher, I think Shamar Stewart's a great add there. I think Mykel Williams from Georgia is also somebody that I could see the Bears falling in love with. Just the size. I think he's the best run defending edge in this class. He has such good technique. He is such a forceful player against the run. That's how I describe him. He's so strong. He's got massive long arms. He's able to displace offensive linemen. Pass rush kind of comes and goes, and the ankle injury kind of scares me because of how long he was out and how much it kind of hurt his bend. He was a little stiff on his 2024 tape, but if you watch 2023, that is peak. That is what Mykel Williams can be fully healthy without any of the injuries. And then if you flip it to the offensive side of the ball, outside of Jeanty, I think maybe Tyler Warren. I don't know if there's a huge avenue for him to get playing time immediately, especially with Kmet getting the big deal. I wonder how much they're going to play 12 personnel if you add a guy like Tyler Warren. But in terms of a dynamic threat, I think Warren makes a lot of sense after the catch. And then you still have the offensive line. I wonder, my biggest question for the Bears this offseason has been what they think of their left tackle situation, because that could truly change the outcome of that first part of the draft. If they think Braxton Jones is going to be fine, if they think he's going to be ready and capable to start, especially with Joe Thuney next to him, then they probably don't draft tackle. But if they think they need to add some more talent to the room, they pass on a guy like Jeanty. They pass on the defensive lineman, and you can go get a guy like Armand Membu or Will Campbell if you think he can play tackle. So I'm so curious where the Bears go, but I think that I can see the vision for most of the top prospects if they decide to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I got so many questions just off some of the names you've brought up, some names that I've discussed here on previous podcasts. Just real quick in terms of the defensive ends, Mykel Williams for me, I think he's a great fit here with the Bears at 10. Maybe they can trade down, but and get them in the teens. But again, if you're not going to be able to trade down, it takes two, right? It takes two to tango. So if a team doesn't want to trade up, and he's a guy that fits your scheme, and I agree with you. I think that ankle injury versus Clemson, it really kind of hampered his season throughout. I still had 5 or 6 sacks, I believe, on the year, and really abused, Kelvin Banks Jr. In those Texas games, and you see the ability to, even to drop back when Kirby Smart dropped him back in coverage. He has got that athletic frame to move for a guy that big and with that size, and I think he's a perfect fit there. Shamar Stewart is a guy, I went down to the Senior Bowl, and I mean, he lit it up. I'm sure you were there as well. So I mean, the way his athletic ability, when you grade his tape, those flashes are freaking amazing. But the instincts for me are what worry me. And then the 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons, and now a lot of stuff's coming out by Texas A&M in terms of their defensive line coach and some of the things that they're asked to do there and their scheme and all that stuff. So he's a bigger gamble for me than a Mykel Williams. So I think I love his traits, I love his size, I love the flash, but for me, Mykel Williams would be a more of a safer pick in my opinion. And then just real quick, I've been pounding the table for Jalen Walker, and I don't know if he's going to get to the Bears at 10, to be honest with you. But I know he's not the typical obviously, to me, I say he's an edge player and an off-ball linebacker body. But I think this is where you would go if you're Ryan Poles or if you're Ben Johnson. You go to your defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, and say, hey, listen, this guy is a damn dude. How can you utilize him in your defense? And I think that's where Dennis Allen comes in and says, all right, cool. I'll have him as an off-ball linebacker, whether it's middle, strong, wherever you want to play him, Dennis Allen, and he can cover. He's got sideline playmaking ability. And man, on third down or pass situations, and he is a beast. And I think that's where I might be in the minority here in terms of some of the fans here in terms of scouting this guy and for specific for the Bears, because he doesn't fit the ideal edge player. But man, Jalen Walker to me is just one of those guys that I feel is a can't miss prospect in this draft.
I love Jalen Walker, one of my favorite prospects in this draft. I do wonder if Dennis Allen goes for an edge that does not fit his athletic measurables. If you remember, Dennis Allen likes guys who are big, tall, and have long arms. Right. If you look at everybody that he coached in New Orleans, I think Brian Brzee was like the most outlier pick for the Saints because he had short arms. But I think when you watch Jalen Walker, like you said, he is an edge in an off-ball linebacker's body. It's been kind of the where does he play? What does he play in the NFL? But when you watch him play, he is such a forceful player moving forward, moving towards the ball. And not only it's different when you're versatile versus a guy without a position. I think Jalen Walker's versatile and has a position. He is an edge player. It's not like an Isaiah Simmons situation where you just don't know where he's going to play. I think Walker has the versatility to play edge, and then you line him up as an off-ball or like a spinner. Who does it now? Zadarius Smith in Detroit. He'll like walk around and they'll just line up right over the guard on third downs. Or like Clay Matthews did this for a long time in Green Bay, where he would just walk around and pick whoever he wanted to go up against, and he would rush from the interior. I think Jalen Walker can unlock some of that versatility. I think you can be a little more you can play more matchup ball, especially with some of the body types that Chicago has up front. I wonder if they really want a guy his size playing on the edge full time. Do they play him out as do they play him as an off-ball linebacker early? And if you play him as an off-ball linebacker, that means you're having to take, if you're in your base, he'll play next to TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. But with the lack of how many teams truly play their base defense now, if he's going to play off-ball, who are you going to play him next to? And that brings up the point of, if you have Jalen Walker playing off ball, I think you need a linebacker who is going to cover up some of the flaws that Jalen Walker has. I think his flaws as an off ball linebacker, he's just stiff. He wasn't asked to do a lot in coverage. When they would drop him, he would drop into the weak hook or the flat to kind of get him away from most of the action. So I wonder if you have him play off ball, can a guy like TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds be good enough in coverage going backwards to kind of mask for some of the inefficiencies Walker has? I think the biggest example of how you could possibly do that effectively is how Green Bay used Edgerrin Cooper in his rookie year. He wasn't a guy who dropped in the coverage a lot. He's running forward all the time, but you had guys behind him who could kind of mask for some of his issues in coverage. You had a guy like Xavier McKinney. They would rotate a lot of Javon Bullard going back to the deep half. They'd have Xavier McKinney kind of come forward in that little robber Tampa area. So I wonder if you can unlock some creativity with Dennis Allen, which kind of brings me back to the main point behind drafting Jalen Walker. This is why defensive coordinators get paid. Yeah. This is why you paid Dennis Allen that amount of money to come coach your defense. You get him good players. He figures out what to do with said good players, and you win football games. So I can see the vision for it. I wonder how they execute it.
Right, and that's the key thing. It's the tape and everything. Again, he might even be available, right? But the tape and everything says, dude, this guy's a day one impact player. And I like, for me, like, I would even say, all right, you can just bring him in on passing down situations, just let him go after the quarterback, and because you have TJ Edwards and you still have Tremaine Edmonds there, for a year at least, and until he gets in more trained or more schooled in terms of the off-ball linebacker position. But that's something that we'll see how that plays out. But going back to the offensive line, obviously I think you touched on it there. What the Bears have done so far in the offseason is kind of fortify the interior of the offensive line. I think they still need some depth, right? So in that, but that you can either get in veteran free agency or even later on in the draft. But I think that you're looking at, if you take a tackle or offensive lineman at 10, it's going to be a left tackle or somebody that can play a left side. So I think Will Campbell obviously comes up to, for me as a guy that would be that, the guy that they can go there at number 10. Now I know you mentioned Membo. For me, Membo is a right side player. You think he can slip over to the left side? Because he's played right tackle. I don't know if he's got the athletic ability. I know he's got the test numbers, but in terms of his tape, you think he could play left side? Because I see it hard for me to envision him playing left tackle. I can see him playing right tackle or right guard, but left tackle, I struggle with Membo there.
I think it'd be a little difficult because he's only played right tackle, but I think he has the movement skills that you see on tape, the athleticism, like you mentioned, where if you're going to move a guy from right to left, he better be a damn good athlete. And I think Membo is one of the better athletes at tackle in this class. But again, I wonder with this offensive tackle class in general, how many of these guys are going to end up getting kicked inside the guard. Kelvin Banks Jr. is a guy who I think would be better at guard.
Me too. I'm there with you as well.
I think Will Campbell can be a good tackle. I think he can be a phenomenal guard. So
I'm there with you too.
What you do with him. The one true tackle we might have, Josh Simmons, coming off
hurt.
of a tailor injury.
Yeah.
So if really early in the draft process, I linked Josh Simmons to the Bears. I felt like that'd be a great pick there. I wonder what they think of him now due to the injury, and if they're still willing to pick him at 10, it'd be probably the first semi-stunner of the draft, taking Simmons that high. But if you're talking about a pure left tackle who has the movement skills, the tenacity, I think some of his issues kind of came up a little bit against better competition, and he transferred it from San Diego State to Ohio State, but he rapidly improved from 2023 to 2024. Injury is a big question still, but if you're looking for a guy who played left tackle for most of his college career, I think Simmons is your guy. But you have a lot of possibilities there. It just depends on what your flavor is at tackle.
Right. And to me, and maybe you'll agree, but if Josh Simmons hadn't gotten hurt, I think he's a top 10 pick, maybe even the first offensive lineman drafted overall in this class. That's how good of a season he was having there at Ohio State. So yeah, that's the injury is the big thing. Then obviously we don't have access to the medical, evaluation on him. So, but yeah, I mean, that's something. And another guy I like, maybe late first round, maybe early second round, if he's last to like pick 39 is Josh Connolly Jr. from Oregon. I think he's a kid that could, again, guard, might be his best position, but I think he could play left tackle in the NFL. And I think he's another guy that they to keep an eye on if the Bears don't go offensive lineman in the first round, and if Josh Connolly Jr. makes it to the second round. But going back to the running back position, obviously Genty is a top running back. I believe on your board, he is on my board. And then for me, at least, I don't know about you, there's a big drop off to Amari and Hampton. I know some people have said, oh, they're really close. To me, it's not. I mean, I know Hampton's got big size, good frame, he's got decent speed, pretty good in terms of between the tackles and contact power, balance, everything like that. But I just think the overall vision and the ability to weave in between traffic, for me, Genty's a step ahead of Amari Hampton. I'm close. I'm wondering how close Hampton is for you to Genty. Is he your number 2 running back? If not, who is?
So I actually have Caleb Johnson as
interesting.
Back.
Okay, as your number 2 running back?
Yes, they're really close. I have Johnson, Hampton within like 2 spots of each other. So in my range, I think that's like borderline first, early second. Both guys, like if you draft them late in the first round, I'm like, okay, I understand that. But the reason I have Johnson over Hampton is for some of the same reason that you said. I think Hampton's vision is a little bit worse than guys like John T, Caleb Johnson. I think he's best fit for a gap scheme team where you can just kind of go, hey, follow the guard and you'll go. And I think that's something that Omari Hampton is good at. When he hits that accelerator button, as quick as he is, as powerful as he is, he's hard to tackle as soon as he gets that stop-start going. But in terms of zone running, I think his vision kind of comes and goes. Whereas with Caleb Johnson, he doesn't have the pure speed or burst that Omari Hampton has, but he's such a smooth operator in zone run and zone running schemes that it would make a lot of sense for teams that want to run a lot of those zone concepts to take a guy like Johnson over Hampton. And I think that's kind of the tune of a lot of this running back class. It is pick your poison. If you want a guy who can be a little bit more of a gap scheme runner, I think Omari Hampton makes a lot of sense there. Quinshon Judkins is probably one of the better gap scheme runners in this class because of his power, because of the speed within the 10-yard range. But if you're looking for guys from more zone, I think that's more Caleb Johnson, Ashton Jonty can do everything. But Travion Henderson is probably more of a zone runner where you put him in alley and he's gone. So it just depends truly on what you like and who you want it from. I do think a sleeper in this running back class is DJ Giddens from Kansas State.
We're right here, man. We are right here, you and I.
He ran sub 4.5, and I was like, absolutely. I want this guy on my team. He's so quick without looking like he's overexerting himself. It looks like everything is so smooth, can run gap or zone scheme. He was insane against Colorado, making guys miss. He wins with power, wins with good footwork. The footwork's really what stands out. So if the Bears do indeed pass up on a guy like John T at 10, I think DJ Giddens around day 2 would make a whole lot of sense.
Yep, and we did a segment, Aldo and I, with my day 3 gems, and I think a guy like Giddens could make it to day 3, and then to me that's insane. I love this kid coming out of Kansas State. We talked about I've been looking for, obviously with Ben Johnson coming in. I've gone back and looked at some of the Detroit film, and they run wide zone, they run inside zone, they run power, they run everything basically in Detroit. So I've been looking for a running back that can do a majority of the stuff, not just concentrating like say just wide zone or just power gap. So I think Giddens can do both. I think Gente can do both. Like you said, I think Caleb Johnson is better suited for a predominantly zone-based scheme. The Bears will run some zone, but I think they also will run a lot more power gap stuff as well. And Judkins, I think, as well. But for me, Giddens, just his vision, his ability to string together multiple cuts, on the same run in traffic, basically. I think that's something that really lightens up on his tape there, and I think a nice compliment to DeAndre Swift, who the Bears are still planning on keeping here. I think Giddens would be a nice fit there. Taj Brooks, another guy I brought up, the kid from Texas Tech, and he's another guy, maybe possibly day 3 guy where other in between tackles, downhill thumper, and who could string together multiple cuts on single runs. I mean, this is just a loaded running back class. So that's to me, that's one of the reasons why, even though I love Gente as a prospect, I think taking him a number 10 overall, where you still have needs on the offensive line, the defensive line, possibly a tight end. I think that would be something where you could maybe pass up on a running back like that and get someone in the 2nd or 3rd round, going from there. But another position that we kind of talked about here and brought up besides running back is tight end. Another group that I think is a deep class. I know you mentioned Tyler Warren. I had a take, earlier a couple weeks ago and said, if the Bears do bring in a Tyler Warren, he's not here, to complement Cole Kmet. He's here to eventually replace Cole Kmet, because Tyler Warren is the best overall tight end in this class. He could be in line. He could do, slot. He could, pass catcher. He's pretty impressive and pretty good into those drag routes and everything in the middle. But he's not that seam stretcher. He's not that, Y or joker, if you want to call a position, where you can flex him out and have him be that ultimate pass catcher, which I've been scouting for this Bears team, looking for some of that nice one to complement, and I've earmarked guys like, Colson Loveland. I think guys like, Mason Taylor, some of those guys are even Elijah Arroyo. Obviously he's got the injury history at Miami. I think those are nicer compliments for Cole Kmet. But I think that Tyler Warren, if the Bears do make Tyler Warren the number 10 overall pick, in my opinion, Cole Kmet's time on this roster is limited. Whether it's this offseason or next offseason, he doesn't have much left on his roster. I'm curious if you agree there.
I do agree. I tend to agree with that, especially when you think about what the Bears or what Ben Johnson liked to do in Detroit. They won with yards after the catch. And I think Tyler Warren is the best tight end in this class in terms of yards after the catch. He reminds me a lot, actually, of the Arizona Cardinals tight end Trey McBride. He doesn't have the longest wingspan, doesn't have the longest arms, but I do think his ability to high point the ball, the ability to go up and get the ball despite having the shorter arms, really stands out. And then again, it's just the versatility and the ability to be dynamic with the ball in his hands. You can run the design stuff, the screen stuff for him. You can just get him, like you said, on drag routes, over routes, and just get him the ball in his hands and let him get going. And I think that makes a lot of sense in the Bears offense. I think Loveland will make a lot of sense in terms of the verticality. If you really want to turn this into, look, we're gonna let Keenan Allen be the true underneath guy. We're gonna let somebody else do all the underneath stuff, and we're just gonna throw it downfield to Roma Dunze, downfield to DJ Moore, downfield to Colston Loveland. That makes a lot of sense. I think his blocking kind of took a hit in 2024, but I think that's largely because of the AC joint injury that he was playing through. So because in 2023 it looked really good. As we get into like day 2, day 3, one of the guys I really like is Notre Dame's Mitchell Evans. He tore his ACL, I believe, in 2023, and in 2024 he kind of was the unsung hero a little bit for Notre Dame offense that eventually reached the national championship. He has such strong hands and such a big wingspan that he can go up and get the ball. He's a quality blocker. I think he probably profiles best as a tight end too, but he's a guy that I think is going to be a whole lot better of a pro than he is a college player. And then one of my weirder evals for this entire process is Texas Tech's Jalen Conyers. I don't know what to do with him because he's such a unique prospect. Got big, long arms, 6'3", 260. He also has 33 carries in his entire career, spanning across Arizona State and Texas Tech. And it's not just like QB sneak stuff or like it's 4th and short. Arizona State was letting him do zone read stuff on 1st and 10 from the 50, and he's running at 45 yards. You know, you can get the ball in his hands. I think he has really nice ball skills. The blocking, I think he's a little over exuberant as a blocker, which I love a guy who's just going to like, I can teach technique. I can't teach want to as a blocker. And he wants to block. Like he just gets a little too out over his skis, but he'd be a really intriguing option again for a team that wants to build on the yards after the catch. And then of course, Harold Fannin is also a very weird prospect because I think he fits in an NFL offense. It's just about what he does. And I think if the Bears plan to keep on Cole Kmet on this team for a long time, I think Harold Fannin is a nice compliment to him in terms of he can get down the field instantly. He can do some of the yards after the catch stuff, but you want him working on a vertical plane instead of trying to go side to side. So again, I kind of wonder where Ben Johnson's offense is going to go. In Detroit, it was a whole lot of yards after the catch. They had the body types. They had the player personnel to win after the catch. I wonder where he goes with this Bears team because the Bears are a little more built for we're going to throw it downfield. So I wonder how they adjust to that.
Yeah, for me, those are a couple of names that you mentioned there. For me, a couple of guys that I've kind of kept my eye on, possibly day 3, Thomas Fadone, the second, is a kid I saw at the Senior Bowl. This kid from Nebraska doesn't have that much production, but you watch him at the Senior Bowl. You know, I like the way he runs the routes. I like his physicality at the catch point. He's one to keep an eye on. But again, I'm just looking for me, in my perspective, I'm looking for a complement to Cole Kmet, not to replace Cole Kmet eventually. Another guy that I kind of struggle with is Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. I like the size. I like the frame. The inconsistencies there, you know, in terms of after the catch, he's a guy that looks like a possession type of tight end. And there's times where he's physical at the catch point. Other times where he kind of, to me at least, seems like he shies away from the catch point. So those are 2 guys, day 3 probably, in terms of the Bears are still looking for a tight end. I would kind of keep an eye on there.
Yeah, with Ferguson, I actually just recently finished up his evaluation, and he's another weird prospect because for a guy with the athleticism, the size, the wingspan to be a vertical field stretcher, he never really did it at Oregon, whether that be because of the offense, but the offense changed during his 4 or 5 years in Oregon, and he was still kind of the safety valve. He was the underneath guy. I think he's going to be a really good underneath guy, but I just wonder how he puts it all together at the NFL level. One of my friends, AJ Schulte, said he reminded him a lot of Tyler Higbee from the Rams. And I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of how he's deployed, what he can do. But again, like you said, he's a fascinating evaluation because he looks the part But sometimes when you watch him play, you just wish there'd be a little bit more impact from him in that offense.
Yeah, a little bit more meat on that steak there for me with Ferguson, but yeah, definitely an intriguing prospect. So, just going back, kind of, I guess, going back on the overall draft, obviously a week from tomorrow, last year the big talk was the 6 quarterbacks going in the first round, and obviously the big shocker was the Michael Penix Atlanta pick. Do you have a feel, or do you have an idea in terms of, will there be a shock in this draft? If so, is there anything that you can see, or anything that you want to predict possibly happening where everybody's gonna be like, whoa, here we go? Because every year there's one, and this is gonna be a draft where I think we're gonna have a lot of those, because teams are gonna have guys that they might have in the second round, other teams have them in the first round. So I think we're gonna have a lot of those whoa moments this first round. So it should be pretty exciting. But is there any feel for what you think could or might happen a week from tomorrow?
I think we see a player get traded on draft night. I think obviously the biggest one obviously is Jalen Ramsey in Miami. I think that he eventually is going to be off the Dolphins roster. I think it makes the most sense for him to get it done before June 1st. There's been a lot of talk about Dallas Goedert's time in Philadelphia potentially coming to an end. I wonder if he ends up being a draft day trade. I just generally wonder what happens with Miami, especially at the 13th overall pick. They have a whole lot of holes. They have a whole lot of guys that are potentially ending up leaving. So I wonder if they end up doing a fire sale of most of their top guys on the draft. But I think we get a draft day trade of a player currently on the roster. My pick is probably Jalen Ramsey, but I'm sure there's going to be this draft is probably going to have a lot of trades. I think this first round is going to have a lot of trades, either trading back, because the meat of this draft is going to be on day 2. It's going to be from the second round, third round, fourth round, potentially. That's where most teams want to stockpile their picks. And if you don't get a lot of picks on day 2, I think we see a lot of teams just punt on day 3 and take their picks into 2026.
Do you think a team like, say, Cleveland, New York, maybe even like the Saints, they bypass the quarterback and with their first round picks and then jump back into the first round to get that quarterback?
I think Cleveland might, because they have the 33rd pick. I wonder if the Giants. I still am of the belief that the Giants take Shedeur Sanders at 3. Because
really? That would be a wow moment. That would be a shocker right there.
Yeah, even though you have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston on the roster, the Giants need to make an impact move. And I think adding Abdul Carter would be a great find, but I also wonder where Abdul Carter plays on that defense if you play him over Kayvon Thibodeau, which would be a very expensive backup. So I wonder if the Giants do take Shedeur at 3, I think that ends up with, the Browns possibly trading up back into the first round from 33. I don't think the Giants trade up from into the first round, because I think they're probably fine standing pat and taking their quarterback in the second round. I do wonder if the Saints get greedy and try and jump to 3 for a quarterback, or kind of wait to see if Shedeur falls to 9. So I don't think there are going to be a lot of quarterbacks taken in the first round of this draft. I think maybe in a slim chance that we get 3, but I'd make the bet that we only get 2 quarterbacks drafted on night 1.
Joseph, have you noticed I have changed the lower third name identifier out of respect for your mom? And so we've already kept you 10 minutes over what we promised. I'd like to keep you for another 5 or 10 minutes, if you don't mind, JP.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You recently wrote for SB Nation the 2025 NFL's most intriguing defensive players at every position. You listed 3 guys at defensive tackle. One of them is a guy that Danny has identified as a day 3 gem, and that's Norman Lott. But I want to hear your thoughts on Darius Alexander, the kid out of Toledo. There was so much talk on our chat room about Alexander when we first started doing these shows about the 2025 NFL draft. I haven't heard his name mentioned lately. Tell me what it is that you find intriguing about Alexander out of Toledo.
So the first thing that stands out about Darius Alexander, when I was at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, he was the one guy who consistently won every single matchup in the 1v1s as a pass rusher. It could be lined up at 1 tech, he was winning. He lined up at 3, he would be winning. He could be lined up all the way out wide against a tackle, and he's winning that pass rush. I think that he's such a consistent pass rusher from multiple fronts. I think he profiles best as a 3 tech, but I think that his athleticism really makes an impact as a pass rusher. I think he can be a high value run defender. The only issue is he is going to be one of the older prospects in this class. I think he's going to be 25 years old when his rookie year starts. That's going to hold you down the draft board a lot. And I think that's going to negatively impact his stock, but I think he's going to make a big impact for a team that gets him on day 2. I don't know if any team trades up for him on night 1 of the draft or if any team actually picks him night 1 of the draft, but he's incredible value for a 4-3 team looking for a 3 tech. I think that he's a great option for a defensive tackle on day 2.
Danny, what are your thoughts on Alexander?
I'm a huge fan of Darius. Actually, I'm gonna be posting a scouting report on him on my Shimon Draft Scout YouTube page, and I Senior Bowl is where he caught my attention as well. 6'5", 6'4", 305 pounds, 34-inch arms is that's that size and length that Dennis Allen looks for as defensive tackle, and he's an active guy. I mean, he's got active hands, and his ability to get and penetrate into the gaps and be a disruptor in the middle of the defensive line. I think he's a guy that's appealing. So if the Bears are at that second round and he's still available at 39 or pick 41, they're looking to fortify their defensive tackle, and that's a need we know going into the draft. That could be someone to keep an eye on there. Darius Alexander out of Toledo.
All right, I have got one more, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you guys compare notes. I have a list here of 5 defensive ends, and I'd like for you guys, both of you guys, to rank them from 1 to 5, with 5 being the least acceptable for a Bear scheme. So Mike Green out of Marshall, Donovan Izzaruko out of Boston College, James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, Michael Williams out of Georgia, and Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M. JP, why don't you start off with your number 5 least fit for the Chicago Bears, Dennis Allen's defensive scheme?
My number 5 in terms of these players is James Pierce Jr. I just think that he's too light. He's too inconsistent against the run to be a 4-3 defensive end. I think that his run defense left a lot. It left a lot on the table. Tennessee kind of would line him up away from where they thought the ball was going to go. I think they kind of made him into a weak side defensive end where your entire deal is to rush the passer. I think he leaves a little bit more on the table that I don't think a Dennis Allen defense would want out of their 4-3 defensive end. So for that reason, I think James Pierce is number 5.
Danny, who do you got at number 5?
I agree. James Pierce, same thing. He's a guy that's like JP just said, I'm sorry, like Joseph just said, he's a guy that, gets after he's a one-trick pony, gets after the quarterback, but in terms of run defense, he's not someone that likes to play the run. That's something that's not gonna fly here with Dennis Allen. Obviously, he's got the height in terms of 6'5". He's light in his pants at 245 and only sub 33-inch arms. So I think that, and plus now there's all this talk about some character off the field stuff with him as well in terms of desire and all that stuff. So I think he's number 5 for me as well.
Joseph, who do you have at number 4?
This is in no way a thought of what I think of the player, who I think is awesome, but Donovan Izzaruko is probably my number 4 here. I just think sometimes he can run himself out of plays, especially in terms of run defense. And again, he's a little bit on the shorter side, a little undersized. I think he's like 248, maybe around 250. But he would add a different element to that pass rush room that the Bears don't really have. But in terms of a Dennis Allen defense, I actually think that he might be a little bit worse of a schematic fit and more of a he's just good. So if you take him, he's just a good player.
What do you think, Danny?
So here we're going to disagree. So for me, it'd be Mike Green. And again, just like Joseph said, it's not for the lack of the player. It's just a fit, right? The sub 33-inch arms, the ability to get after the quarterback. But really, he's a better run defender than James Pierce, but he's still not up to standards in terms of what Dennis Allen likes to do. So I think just a scheme fit. He's a guy that needs to be out as a 3-4 outside linebacker. Stand up on a 2-point stance or rush from there. So that's why I think Mike Green would not be a great fit here for Dennis Allen in the scheme. So he'd be a number 4 for me.
All right, Joseph, who you got at number 3?
My number 3 is actually Mike Green, and sort of the same stuff that Danny said about Mike Green for his number 4 is kind of why I also think that Mike Green doesn't go above number 3. I think both Green and Ezeraku are more stand-up edges, and I wonder how well he carries 251 because he didn't work out at the combine. He did the pro day, ran at the pro day. I just wonder how well he carries at 251 because it's a big jump from playing in the Sun Belt at 245 to playing in the NFL at 251. And I think that if you're making the case for Mike Green in terms of being a Dennis Allen edge, he just plays hard. He's going to go 100% every single play, and he's going to make up for that lack of size and that true lack of just mass that Dennis Allen likes as his edge by just playing really hard.
Very good. Danny.
Yeah, we flipped him here. So for me, Ezeraku would be my next guy, and the reason why I have him ahead of Green is it's a slight thing, but it's the 34-inch arms. I mean, he's got that length that we know Green likes and his edge guys. And again, I really like Ezeraku is going to be a stand-up 3-4 outside linebacker as well, but he has shown the ability to put his hand in the ground. Also, someone that while he's not great defensively versus the run, he's a guy that gives, I think, a better effort. Also has the ability to kind of set a semi-hard edge on the outside. Again, utilizing that length in terms of his arm to be able to use that pole move and help funnel some of that running back flow back into his teammates in the defensive line. So that's why, and plus he's very productive. 16.5 sacks, led the ACC last year. So I think he would be a guy because of the a little bit better in terms of a run defender and also more length in terms of the arm length. Although his height is 6'2.5", he's not as tall as the other two. But the arm length to me, I think makes a difference here if we're picking between these two players.
All right, so you guys have both narrowed it down to the same top 2 players. Fits for the Bears defensive end scheme. JP, give me 1, 2, and 1 in that order.
Oh man, this is truly splitting hairs because I think they both are perfect fits for the Dennis Allen defense. My number 2 is Mykel Williams because the thing that separates Mykel Williams and Shamar Stewart for me is I think Shamar Stewart has a little bit more flexibility, a little more pass rush upside. Even though Mykel Williams is younger, I think he's better against the run. And I think he just has a little bit more awareness once he gets around the ball than Shamar Stewart. But I think Stewart's athletic upside, that athletic ability to get after the passer, if you watch him in 2023 and all of his alignments where he's outside the tackle, his pass rush plan is actually a little bit more developed, I thought, than I previously thought going in about Shamar Stewart. But I think you're truly splitting hairs between Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart. For me, it's the athletic upside of Stewart that gives him the one spot. But Mykel Williams would be a hand-in-glove fit for Dennis Allen.
I got a feeling Danny's going to flip these. I'm looking at his reaction now.
You know me so well, Aldo. You know me so well. Yeah. For me, it'd be the flip. It'd be Michael Williams over Shamar Stewart, and I agree with Joseph in terms of the body type, the athletic ability, the length, and all that stuff. He fits the profile. But for me, Michael Williams is a guy that was more productive at Georgia. We talked about Shamar Stewart, only 4.5 sacks in his career there at Texas A&M. Michael Williams for me was coming into it last year, was one of the higher rated prospects at that position, and then it just ended up hurting himself in that first game against Clemson. Just wasn't the same in terms of get off, and took a while for him to really get back to being the guy we anticipated seeing coming into the season. So the length, the ability to play the run. I think he finds the ball quicker. Personally, I think he finds it quicker than Shamar Stewart, for me at least. But yeah, I mean I'm a big Michael Williams fan. I'm a big Georgia Bulldogs fan as well in terms of what Kirby Smart produces there from defensive players perspective. So Jalen Walker and Michael Williams to me are guys that I would love to see one or both possibly on the Bears defense next season.
So the question is, why the lack of sacks for Shamir? Joseph, what do you think?
So I think it partially has to do with the way that Texas A&M played Shamar Stewart. For his entire career, he was kind of lined up as a 4-eye in the defense. So the 4-eye is in between the guard and the tackle. He is on the inside shoulder of the tackle, technically. You are playing the run on the way to the pass. When you watch him pass rush, he takes a step inside to make sure that he's playing the run, clears that it's an actual pass, and then he has to get back outside to rush the passer. But I think some of his underlying numbers really help him out in terms of why he didn't have as many sacks as a guy like Michael Williams. I think in this, according to the 33rd team, in terms of percentage of pass rushes with a pressure last season for this draft class, Shamar Stewart had a 13.4% pressure rate. Michael Williams was at 11.5%. And again, Williams was injured, but when you think about a guy like Shamar Stewart, who was in a really weird, really collegey defense that would ask him to basically, again, he was playing at 290 pounds, playing basically defensive tackle, and you're asking him to rush all the way outside on the edge. I think that there's a transition there. But you see guys like Trayvon Walker who have shown that they have the athletic potential because of how they move. And I think watching Shamar Stewart's 2023, where he rushed outside in those snaps only, where he was lined up on a wide 9 going after the passer, I think he showed off a little bit more of a pass rush plan. It's really, for me, he just needs to finish plays better. He just got to tackle better. And right. I think for someone with that athletic upside, I'm willing to bet on that. But when it comes to a guy like Michael Williams, you can also bet on him in terms of athletic potential because he's 20 years old. He won't turn 21 until after the draft. So again, they're very close and they're very similar, but they win in different ways. And I think they both are really good fits for a Dennis Allen defense.
Yeah, and JP, you nailed it right there. For me, it's the finish with Shamar Stewart. It's just how many times that I see him beat the guy, get in the backfield, and just miss the quarterback or miss the running back for a tackle for a loss. And it's just, I think, whether it's the scheme, whether it's the, it needs to be coached up. He definitely needs to have a game plan in terms of his pass rush repertoire. I think that's someone where, obviously you can coach that, right? You can't coach his physical skills, his abilities, his first step quickness, and I mean, at the Senior Bowl, you saw him, he was blockable and in one-on-ones. I mean, no one could handle him. So I think, he's got the talent. It's just a matter of he might need more time, some more development. That's why at number 10 for me, it's too rich to take that high of a risk on someone. Now, if you want to trade down and if he's still there, like in the teens or something like that, I'm a little bit more comfortable taking that shot there and just giving him to my defensive corner and say, all right, or defensive line coach, say, you've got the talent here. Let's go ahead and coach him up. And I think that's where you could see someone like that shine, depending on what scheme and where he goes and who coaches him up. But yeah, that's why for me, like Michael, I know why. Well, at least I think I know why he struggled early on. It was because of that ankle sprain. But for Stewart, I was just like, dude, just finish that play. I mean, you're flashing on tape. You're getting into the backfield. but either he just, for whatever reason, either he's not locating quick enough, or he misses a tackle, or doesn't wrap up. For whatever reason, it just looked like he wasn't a great fit. Even Nick scoring, like I watched Nick scoring tape, and while he put on weight and it looked a little bit more thicker than he was at the year before at Purdue, but he made for me more impact, as a pass rusher than what Stewart did, right? At least he got to the quarterback, and when he pressured the quarterback, he was able to affect the quarterback. For me, Stewart beat his guy, got into the backfield, but just wasn't able to make any sort of impact on the play. And that's why for me, it's right now, it's Michael Williams over Stewart.
Yeah, and I think with Jamar Stewart, it's kind of funny because I think he just overruns every play in terms of a pass rush, where it's like, oh my God, I won. I beat the tackle. And then he goes flying past the quarterback. It's like, oh, like you're right there. You did such a good job. Just finish the play. And I think
that's on his highlight reel too. I see a lot of those.
Yeah, he just goes flying past. It's just like, dude, you're right there. Just wrap him up. But I think for me, again, with Michael Williams, I worry a little bit about some stiffness, lingering stiffness from the ankle injury. I think some of the stiffness in the hips kind of worries me a little bit. But as someone who can be a hammer, as someone on stunts, loop, some of the pass rush games Dennis Allen will play up front, I think Michael Williams makes a lot of sense. But again, it is very much like between those two, you really could not ask for a better dilemma if you're Dennis Allen.
Excellent stuff. Joseph, before we let you go, I got to let our audience know that yesterday at SB Nation, you released an article where you compared some players, some prospects to anime characters. And I would love to talk to you about everyone that you did, but let's just pick one. I picked this one, Will Campbell and Ichiro Miyata. Tell us why Miyata and Campbell are similar.
All right, this is awesome. Okay, so in the world of Hajime no Ippo, Ichiro Miyata does not have the power that Ippo Makinochi does. He doesn't have the power that Takamura has. But how Ichiro Miyata wins is through being the best counterboxer in the world of Hajime no Ippo. He's able to see what guys are doing, and he's able to prepare, and he's able to win with counters off of that, the speed, the technique. And I think that's where Will Campbell wins as a pass protector, especially just because of the lack of length. It's been talked about all draft cycle. Will Campbell has 32-inch arms. Okay, we got that, but it's what he does with the lack of length that really impresses me. He has such a strong core and such a flexible core that he's able to torque and he's able to anchor down so quickly against guys that are bigger, guys that have longer arms, guys that are more powerful. You can watch the tape against Jamar Stewart. I think they had a really nice back and forth where Stewart won sometimes with his power, with the speed and the burst, but Will Campbell's able to get him because he's able to beat him to the spot. And he was able to anchor down against all that power. So for me, he reminds me a lot of Miyata because he doesn't win in the ways that a traditional power boxer or a traditional guy with speed does, but he wins with technique, he wins with counters, and I ultimately think both guys are just going to be really damn good.
Yeah, but the question I have is, what is Miyata's arm length? Because in boxing, it's reach, right?
Yeah,
that's reach,
right. But I was going to ask Danny if he needed his son to translate some of that for him.
Yeah, my son's into anime. I that's a whole different world for me.
Yeah. Great stuff, Joseph. Really great stuff. Listen, we're going to continue to read your stuff. We're going to continue to bother you every few months so that you could pop back in. I'm over here sipping on my Stella Artois, listening to you and Danny, and I lost track of time. I said, oh man, we've already kept them 10, 15 minutes past our allotted time. Really appreciate you're very generous with your time and your expertise on the draft, football, and anime. It's pretty outstanding.
Thank you guys for having me on. Anytime you want to talk draft, talk football, talk anime, I'm here. I love being on with you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon, brother. Bye-bye. That is Joseph Paul. It's probably Paul Acosta. And I should have told him, tell your mom, share the show with your mom. All right. So now we're going to talk about some gems, right? So I want us to take a break, Danny. What I'm going to do is show an abbreviated version of the tape that you released on Shimon Draft Scout, your YouTube channel, where you talked about day 3 gems. And in this clip, you're talking about a wide receiver that a lot of people are starting now. I'm hearing a lot of talk about this guy. You were one of the first to mention his name that I heard anyway. And in this 3-minute tape, you go over Dante Thornton, your day 3 gem, one of your day 3 gems at wide receiver. Here it comes.
Kind of going back and forth. I talked about, with some of the receivers I was looking for slot receivers, right? But this guy, I don't envision this kid in the slot, so I've kind of backtracking there. But this is the guy that brings you some of that big play potential that we've talked about in terms of what Ben Johnson could be looking for at the receiver position. And it's Dante Thornton out of Tennessee. This is a kid, 6'5", 205 pounds, 32 and 1/8 arm length, almost 10-inch hand. So he's got that big catch radius, but more importantly, he's got a 4.30 flat 40 time at the combine, 1.51 10-yard split, a 33-inch vertical. This is a guy that's got big play potential written all over him, and that element of speed is missing currently on this Bears offense, right? With Roma Dunze and with DJ Moore, they're fast players, but they're not home run hitting ability kind of players. And Deontay Thornton gives you that ability. Now, he started his career at Oregon for the first 2 seasons, 2021 and 2022. Didn't play much there, playing 25 games, had 5 career starts, transferred to Tennessee in 2023. Really was just a part-time starter, only started 7 games there. But in 2024, this past season, he led the Vols with 661 receiving yards with only 26 receptions, 6 touchdowns. He led the FBS and the SEC, averaging 25.4 yards a catch. So again, 661 yards on just 26 receptions, averaging 25.4 yards a catch. So again, giving you that big play potential. This is a guy that the combination of size, length, and speed is outstanding. Plays in the Power 5 SEC conference. Quick feet, loose hips. You talk about running some of those comeback routes, some of those quick hitters. You can see him kind of, be able to, in terms of sink his hips and create some separation away from the corner. Cornerbacks, you notice when you watch his tape, they give him a lot of cushion. They are scared of that 4.30 speed, but he heats up that cushion really quick, and he's on those corners really quick because of that first step explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. Long strider, and again with that build-up speed, he gets on the corners real quick. Next thing you know, the corners are bailing and they're turning and they're trying to run with him, and you see him create that vertical separation, right? He had a 75-yard touchdown catch versus Oklahoma. He had other big play. He tore up Vanderbilt. So if you catch some of those games, you can see some of that talent this kid has. So again, just a guy that can create separation, bring that home run hitting ability that this Bears offense currently does not have. Now, as this draft process has gone on, as he, did what he did at the combine, more and more teams are talking about him. So, will he still be there day 3? Now you're hearing maybe some third round buzz on Deontay Thornton. We'll see, but he's a guy that, again, the full route tree is not there. Only has 12 career starts. So, these are some things, the experience, that you might see him kind of slip into day 3 range. So that's where I have him going currently, maybe in the 4th round.
Outstanding job there, Danny, with your analysis of Thornton.
I saw a comment there. I think you made the same comment yesterday in terms of Velus Jones. Guys, this is not Velus Jones. Trust me. I know that the orange gives you some Velus Jones vibe, but remember, Velus Jones was drafted out of USC, not Tennessee. He played for Tennessee as well, but no, this guy is a talented kid. I talked about 26 receptions, only average over 20, almost 25 yards or over 25 yards a catch, 6 touchdowns. So very limited production. But yeah, I mean, he's not fully developed as a route runner. So there's still something where Antoine Randall, he's gonna have to come and coach his kid and you make him a full receiver. But man, that element of speed, the ability to kind of, take the top off of defense, some of the Bears are really lacking right now. And some of that remember, Ben Johnson utilized with Jameson Williams in Detroit. So I think that's where I kind of came in here, where I saw him and I thought, wow, this would be a nice little fit here scheme wise, fit wise, and also, again, filling a need on offense with that deep speed.
Yeah. Let's see. J2K it was thinks that Thornton is a little stiff, doesn't have enough experience. But that's one of the reasons the experience is because why you forecast that he will be available in day 3, correct?
Yeah, only 12 career starts in his collegiate career. Again, started off at Oregon and transferred to Tennessee. Never got that starting nod. But man, it's just whenever he's out there, whenever he's put on in the field with the balls in his hands, he's a guy that makes big plays. And again, he's kind of a one-trick pony at this point. I keep going back to in terms of the route tree. He's not someone that's going to be running these great routes and creating separation, all that stuff. But he's a guy that has got that one ability, which is get vertical and get downfield and make big plays. And I think that's where he could potentially help this team. Now, again, why is he available in day 3? Because some of the things that J2K said, he's not fully developed yet. He's a guy that doesn't have the full experience, not a full-time starter. So there's reasons why some of these guys, we touched on in the clip we recorded, why these guys drop into a day 3. But like just that element of big play potential, I think this is a guy that could bring that to this offense. And I think he would be a nice day 3 pick.
For Danny's complete list of 9 guys, head over to his YouTube channel. It is at Shimon Draft Scout. Head over there. Make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with your other Bears fans, draftniks. He's got some great evaluations. Well over 20 videos now, right, Danny?
Yeah, we have 35 videos currently.
There you go. 35. Who's 35? Roland Harper.
Neil Anderson.
Neil Anderson. Thank you. There you go. All right. So I asked Danny to do some work on my 5 gems.
No. Let's go back. You okay. Said, you know what? I'm not going to let you get away with your day 3 gems, Danny. I'm going to put on my scouting cap and I'm going to give you my day 3 gems. And I want you to tell me about these guys. So that's what it is. You gave me a homework assignment.
I did give you a homework assignment. And, I have always said and will continue to say, I am not a draft evaluator anywhere near. I'm not a draft evaluator, period. But I do like to look at players and make my own evaluations, but I don't have the expertise of a Danny Shimon. So that's why I gave him this list of 5, and I wanted some confirmation. Am I seeing something good? The first guy, I'm just going to play this video as a transition to the second.
Jim DK with an explosive. He's got DK. Jim DK. And a great job by DK. Jim DK has emerged as the go-to guy
really
now.
Has. I am looking for speed. I am looking for those game changers, those sudden strike artists. And this guy really, really caught my eye. The speed that he had, the second fastest wide receiver, tied with Jalen Noel, someone you've talked about on this show, Danny. And so his speed, the fact that he is a gunner and a punt returner on special teams makes him almost instantly available. I'm sure Hightower has looked at this guy and said, while he is undersized, he's got guts and balls to get in there on special teams and get the job done. So I ask you, Danny, you've done some work on him. Am I anywhere to being right on this guy?
No, I think you hit it home run here with this one. DK was a guy that was on my list. I was looking at some of his games. Obviously, when you mentioned him, I was familiar with him, and I went in and just kind of dug even more into him. And I think this is a guy that I think once Ben Johnson sees this kid, I think he's going to want him on his team. And you talk about Richard Hightower in terms of his special team stuff. I think this is a guy, DK, to me right now, from scouting all these receivers, he's probably the best blocking receiver that I've seen so far in this class right now. I mean, in terms of getting downfield, blocking for his teammates, physicality. He's a guy that plays the game hard. He's a competitive football player. Has no fear. You talk about some of the punt return, some of the the special teams prowess he has as a gunner, but also going over the middle and making tough catches over the middle with no fear. But yeah, I mean 6'1". 196 is what he measured at the combine with 32 and an eighth inch arm length. So he's got some of that big catch radius ability. 4.3, 4.40 with a 1.5, 110 yard split. A 38.5-inch vertical with a 10-foot 8-inch broad jump as well. So he shows you some of that lower power ability. A 6.823 cone shows you some of that ability to kind of bend and get in and out of his routes. Played for his first 4 seasons at Wisconsin. Made 31 starts there. Led the Badgers in 2022 with 47 receptions and for 689 yards and 6 touchdowns. Transferred to Florida this past season in 2024. Led the team with 42 receptions. Made 11 starts with 783 yards and averaging 18.6 yards a catch. And to be honest with you, watching his tape, if he had better quarterback play, a more consistent quarterback play at Florida, I think he would have better numbers there as well. So, but again, the first thing that catches your eye with this kid is his ability to block, right? And then you see him ability to work that middle. And we talked about finding someone in the slot, and this is a guy that can line up everywhere, but predominantly can line up in slot. He's got that toughness to be able to help seal that edge and kind of block down on that exterior defensive end. So I think he gives you that ability as well. And Ben Johnson, one of the things, although you pointed out when he first introduced, or it might have been at the owners meeting, no block, no rock is what he kind of said for his receivers. Well, this is a guy that's going to block, so I expect him to get the rock. And that's the thing. He's got natural hands catcher. Again, is able to stretch the seam with his 4.34 ability in terms of speed. Does a nice job of tracking the ball over his shoulder, be able to bring in the deep ball down the football field. So I like this kid a lot. I think if he's there in that 5th round, which I believe pick 148, and then looking for a receiver, I think he fits the bill. Talk about special teams prowess. This guy has both punt and kickoff return experience. We talked about his ability to block. We talked about his ability to add speed from that slot position. I think Chi DK is a kid from Florida, is a guy that the Bears will look, in my opinion, very, very close at come day 3 of the draft.
Yeah, and I do think J2K said that he's really not considered a sleeper. I disagree with that. I have not heard this guy's name mentioned anywhere. This is the first evaluation, that I've heard, and it comes from Danny. And I just feel like, in a class that there aren't a lot of good wide receivers, that you would think you'd at least, if he was that good, you would think that you would at least hear him. But I think he's just slowly starting to gather attention. He played at Wisconsin in 2023, like you said.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so went over to Florida. He wanted to play at Wisconsin because that's where his dad went, the family and so forth.
He's from there. He's from Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Exactly. But he made a business decision. He took the NIL deal at Florida, and it helped him get attention, but it's still not like he has he's at the forefront of receivers mentioned. I don't want to defend the fact whether he's a sleeper or not. I just like the guy. He's a good player, and I hope the Bears consider him.
Well, I think he's a guy that's going to probably go day 3. And so I think, and that's where we're looking at here in terms of, is he a guy that's well known? Probably not, but he's a guy that's a sleeper. Like no one knows about him. I think he's a guy that, a lot of people know about, especially I know scouts know about him. So, but I think he could slip through the cracks and be a day 3 guy where, top of the round 4, middle round 4, whatnot. If you're still looking for a receiver, maybe they can, I don't know, currently don't have a 4th round pick, but maybe they can get back in there if you're looking for this type of a, receiver. But again, I think once Ben Johnson looks at this guy, especially, the way he plays, I think Antoine Randall L will gravitate to his tape, and I think he's going to want to go ahead and try to bring him on this roster as well. So I think, looking at this guy, I think you nailed it there, Aldo. I think this is a perfect player for this coaching staff, and I think he's fits nicely in this team. Like I say, worst case scenario, he's your 4th receiver, a gunner on special teams, a punt returner, kickoff returner. That's the worst case scenario for a day 3 guy. I think that's still a very, very valuable player until he develops. And like route tree, or I'm saying creating separation with his route running is something that he doesn't really do that great. He's good on drag routes. He does have the speed to be able to kind of run away from defenders. Again, if you have better quarterback, more consistent quarterback play at Florida, I think you would have more production there as well. But, a couple of times though, he beat his guy with over the top in terms of speed getting down the field. Either it wasn't being looked at or the ball was poorly underthrown, watching some of his film. So I think this was a very, very good selection there by you, Aldo. So again, you're a tip of the cap to you for your scouting eye there.
Thank you. All right. Well, let's see if I continue my streak here. The next player, and Danny knows this because I've been telling him since he and I have been working together. I've told him I would love to get ourselves a speed back. Tariq Cohen was probably the fastest that we've had in recent memory. There have been others in the past. I go back to the days of Gale Sayers. But so I want a speed back. I also want a big burly back to serve as that kind of lightning and thunder type of attack. But the lightning attack, I think, could be delivered by Jaden Blue, who I think is a talent that the Kansas City Chiefs would find and draft, and then he would immediately start to pay dividends. Am I right on Jaden Blue?
Yeah, he's that lightning quick, speed back or change of pace back, however you want to call him, from Texas. Not a big guy, 5'9", 196. But his track athlete in high school. Ran a 4.38 40, a 1.51 10-yard split at the combine. This is only 5 starts at Texas. Another guy that really, wasn't a full-time, bell cow kind of running back, but you see here some of his athletic ability, the quick feet, the ability to string together multiple cuts in a single run. I think he's got, good vision in terms of seeing that backside, kind of blocking develop. And then again, talk about planting and go. This guy has some tremendous burst to be able to get through that small crease and just then take it to the house. He is a home run hitting type of back. He's a guy, every time he touches the ball, there's a chance he can take it to the house. And that's what he brings. And you put on his tape, and he's a guy that has that big play potential. There was one play against Texas. Against I believe it was Ohio State or which game I was watching, but it was a small seam and he just hit it. Got it, hit it, and he was gone. I mean, that was like a blur. So I think, he's a guy that, you mentioned it, although, he's like not the guy I was looking for because they're going to keep DeAndre Swift. So I was looking for more of that in between the tackles, kind of downhill, pounder guy that can make his, his hay, running between tackles with physicality and contact balance. He doesn't have that. Blue doesn't have that. He's a guy that doesn't have the contact power or balance. But he's a guy that does have that big play potential. We talked about his ability, catch, passes out of the backfield. He had, last season, he had 42 receptions last year, 6 receiving touchdowns. So it gives you some of that out of the backfield as well. And the one key thing that I always harp on when I'm watching Jaden Blue's tape was Ben Johnson. They were talking about when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. And he said, we justified that pick, not because it was a running back, but because he was a weapon. And I think this is not a bell cow, carry the ball 25 times running back, but he's a weapon. And if you utilize correctly, I think he could be someone that you could take advantage of and make big plays happen because of it. Again, not a bell cow, not a guy's going to be carrying the ball 25 times a game, but more of a guy that can come in, change of pace. And that 4.38 speed, that is legit speed. I mean, he is a blur once he hits it. And again, we were talking about what they run here. They're going to be running here in terms of offensive scheme. They're going to be running a lot of wide zone stuff, inside zone, some gap power, all that stuff. But he is tailor-made for that wide zone system. Talk about just kind of letting everything kind of trail out to the outside, seeing that backside, seam or gap open up, planting his feet, and then just taking off. And now you talk about him getting into that second and third level of the defense. Again, big play potential written all over this kid.
I love it. Cliff asks, could Blue fit on the same team as Swift?
It's a good question, Cliff, because I think if DeAndre Swift wasn't here, I think if you draft, say, your Genty or Hamptons or your Judkins or whoever you want to draft, and then you get a Blue in the 5th round, for example, if he's still there, that's a tremendous combination. But now, DeAndre Swift here, I think he's a little bit too similar. Now, Swift doesn't have the type of explosive speed this kid has, but also I think Swift is a little more bigger, a little more sturdier, obviously a little more accomplished. So I think that's where I think it might be a duplicate, if you will, to a Swift. Not entirely a duplicate, but closer, if you will, than any other of the backs we've talked about previously. So because they're both not in between the tackle type of runners, they're both kind of that stretch it out, get to the outside, make plays in the passing game type of running back. So, could it be, if you get a guy like Blue after getting your other running back, could you be maybe a Swift could be a potential trade? I'm not sure what the contract details are in terms of trading him, the cap hits, all that stuff, but that could be something you can consider there as well. But yeah, we're talking about, again, look at Jaden Blue as more of a weapon on offense as opposed to like a guy that's going to come in and take a starting job from anybody, because he's probably not going to be a bell cow running back in the league. He's just going to be a guy that's going to be utilized in certain special situations and take advantage of his skill set, which is that speed basically.
All right. Great stuff. And some excitement in the chat room about that player. So the next player I chose was a tight end who everyone is going to know as probably the best blocking tight end available in the draft. Daniel Jeremiah said it during the combine, and that really stuck on my mind. And the more I started to do research on him, this guy isn't the prototypical tight end that I want as my number one tight end, but I got a number one tight end. I want a guy that's going to complement Cole Kmet, and I want a guy who is going to go out there and level people when he's blocking, which is why I chose Jackson Hawes. Tell me what you think, Danny.
Yeah, you nailed it. Basically, he's the best blocking tight end in this draft class. He's a guy that in high school was an all-state basketball player. Went to Yale. His first 3 seasons was a starter there at Yale for 3 years. And then transferred over to Georgia Tech, and basically he's a guy that was used as an inline blocker. You see him as a lead blocker. You see him a guy and setting the help set the edge and give the running back an ability to come and clear that corner. But also when he was throwing the ball, he shows to have natural hands. His hands catcher, can get some yards after the catch, as we're seeing here. Ran a 4.8 240, which is not a blazing 40, but I think he plays faster than any time in terms of his play speed. But a guy who can get down the football field. Not going to be the accomplished route runner. Is not going to be the accomplished pass catcher. He's a guy that occasionally will line up possibly in the backfield, more like a lead fullback. So you utilize him in multiple different ways if you're a Ben Johnson here. But yeah, the best blocking tight end in this class, and I think a guy that is going to be in the league for at least 10 years because of that ability to be that blocking. Heck, we saw Mercedes Lewis go from a pass catching threat to a blocking tight end, and he lasted he's going into his 20th season, I believe it is. So I mean that's the type of ability this guy has as a blocker. So he's only going to get better. It's only going to get bigger. I think, and he's got some ability, shows some ability as a pass catcher. Never really had an opportunity. The most he's had in terms of receptions in a season was 16, which was last year. So obviously he hasn't been given that shot in terms of, to see what he could do as a pass catcher. So there's some development there, route running and all that stuff. But again, initially he's going to be a guy that's going to be lined up in your, 13 personnel, maybe even your 12 personnel. Heck, even is a lead block and as a fullback possibly, So, but that's where his role is going to be. Again, definitely a day 3 guy. I think definitely is going to get drafted. Team like the 49ers would be looking at someone like this. Obviously, I think with Ben Johnson, what he wants to do with the tight end position, I think this is what you could do there as well. So, not the perfect complement for Cole Kmet in terms of, hey, we want that, seam stretching tight end to kind of complement Cole, but this guy will be more of the blocker. Now, the only question I had is, they did bring in Durham Smythe, and I think he's kind of fit that role, if you will, in terms of that third tight end, blocking tight end. So maybe this might be a luxury that they won't utilize a pick on a Jackson Hawes, but definitely if you're looking for someone like that, this kid fits that bill.
Yeah, and Kyle, you're addressing Kyle's thought right there. The reason why I think it's necessary to duplicate that is because if you don't land a Tyler Warren, a Mason Taylor, or Colton Lovestand, one of the true tight ends that you can rely on to be a big part of your passing attack, then I think that the next step, and there's some other tight ends who are good pass catchers. I don't want to neglect that. But I would think that the next step is to bring in some blocking tight ends. Add to the Durham Smith. It's not a bad thing to have 2 blocking tight ends so you can run 3 tight end formations. And I also feel that Cole Kmet has made progress as a move tight end, and he's got that kind of duality to him that it's probably his best to play in line, but he can also be that guy to get open for Caleb, get open down the seams. He's proven that he can do it. So Jackson really intrigues me. I wouldn't mind having. And then the other thing is, as you're looking at these highlights of him, he is just a great outlet pass catcher. Just dump the ball off to him. He's a big target.
After the catch, or it gives you some of that yards after the catch as well.
Exactly. He's hard to bring down. He's going to tire your defensive backs. I think this next clip here is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Here it is, over the middle. Bang, bang. And then there's even another one. It's after this one. This is he's not gonna average 20 yards a catch, but he is gonna do this right there.
Right. Yeah. And again, you can, like you said, although you can line these guys up in multiple different formations. You could, like you said, put Cole Kmet in the slot. He could be that big pass catching tight end, if you will, and line him and Durham Smythe in line. Or you can put him, like I said, in the backfield as a fullback, if you will, as a lead blocker too. So he did it multiple different ways at Georgia Tech, and I think this is a guy that could help the offense in multiple different ways. May not be the go-to pass catcher, but when given the opportunity, as you're seeing in some of these highlights, when given the opportunity, this kid can make some plays, right? So he's not a total stiff in terms of as a pass catcher, but it just wasn't utilized in that manner. Obviously, that part of his game hasn't been developed yet, but definitely a kid. If you do get if you swing and miss on some of the other ones, and don't get a chance to get some of the other ones, this would be a good guy to bring in and use Cole Kmet as that slot guy that can help hopefully get down the football field and make some plays for you. But the one thing we know is Ben Johnson is going to utilize the run game. He's going to utilize the tight end, right? So I've said that they may carry 4, maybe 5 tight ends and on this roster just because the way he utilizes the tight end. So that's why I think Colson Loveland, the kid from Michigan, is a tremendous fit for this offense. Kind of like that Sam Laporta kind of role where he's that guy that can stretch the seam and make some plays in the middle of the field if you can. If you have Cole Kmet as your inline tight end, if you will, your wide tight end. So different ways they can go. And when we had this name listed, I'm like, I've seen this guy. I know what he does best. He blocks. But man, you put on his tape, you watch him, and when you give him an opportunity, he makes some plays there as well. You talked about some of the yards after the catch as well too.
Good
so
stuff.
far, you're 3 for 3 with me, Aldo.
This is where I screw up. Coming up next.
Yeah, we're going to be 5 for 5, that's for sure.
So, you got to look at the defensive line. This is one of those drafts where you're going to have to be lucky to find a pass rushing defensive end gem on day 3. You're going to have to get lucky. But I do think that it's going to be a lot easier to draft somebody on day 3 who can help the middle of the line. This next guy here is not even projected to be drafted by some of the services that I've seen. I've seen him listed as a priority undrafted free agent. But I like what this guy has in terms of tools, and I'm hoping that he could develop, and that is Sean Martin, defensive tackle out of West Virginia. Look at that wingspan. Look at the arm reach, 35-inch. What do you think about Sean Martin?
Yeah, you talk about, the first thing that sticks out about Martin is his size, right? 6'5", 35-inch arm length, 10 and a 5/8-inch hand size, huge. This is the guy that ran a 4.88 40 with a 1.70 10-yard split. This was a top defensive prospect coming out of high school in West Virginia. Played basketball there as well, obviously with that size. A 3-year starter for the Mountaineers, making 21 career starts. He's a guy that's been, in terms of the program, been very, very highly touted. Won the Iron Mountain Man Award, which is given to the player that shows commitment in terms of the strength and training program there. For me, my notes right away, I put down excellent combination of size and length. Looks the part, right? Can press 2-gap, locate the ball. Has ability to kind of fire, get skinny, if you will, get into the gaps and kind of present his helmet and be a deterrence there as either a run defender or even, possibly get after the quarterback. But, for me, this is a guy that it's just, not there in terms of, being a guy that could come in here and be a week one, day one contributor. He's a guy that you can bring in more of a developmental prospect, right? So,
Right.
Priority free agent is probably where you're looking to get him. Maybe if you feel like, he might not, might get scooped by another team. You maybe draft him in the 7th round or something like that. I think they have 2 7th round picks. So maybe, but again, he's more of a developmental prospect. He's a guy that can give him to your coaching staff and say, all right, work with that tools. 6'5", with that type of reach, with that type of size. Dennis Allen likes that type of body type and that type of player. But lacks really skinny lower half. So he's a guy that can get mauled in the run game by double teams in terms of blockers and stuff like that. So, but in terms of what he does, he's got the size, and he does show some flashes of being able to maybe being that one up the field penetrator, but has no pass rush game plan. Has got to get better in terms of getting off blocks. Saw a lot of one-on-one blocks where he got stuck on the blocks and just couldn't disengage from the guard, and really was made to null and void in terms of having an impact on the run play. So there's areas where you have to coach him up and get him better, but definitely one of those developmental types where possibly as a free agent you can sign him after the draft.
I think that's a very fair evaluation. I like him as your second pick of the 7th round, or sign him in as an undrafted free agent. He's got tools that you can work with and hopefully develop. Wouldn't be a bad, acquisition to throw into your practice squad and mold them.
When I watched them, I kept thinking Roy Roberts or Harrison, when he was coming out of Utah,
Okay.
where it was kind of like that tweener outside linebacker, defensive lineman. Now Harrison, I think is a more twitchier player than Martin, but I think it's some similar tools, long, big guy, and again, it took him. Roy Robertson took him a couple of seasons before he made an impact on that defensive line, but once he got coached up, he took off there, right? So I think this is a guy similar kind of potential where you can take that's his tools and just kind of coach him up and give him what he needs to go out and be effective there. And again, fits the profile. Dennis Allen loves these kind of guys, big, tall, long, and athletic. Martin fits that profile. So we'll see.
Well, here's another guy that fits the profile. He's a guy who has gotten more acclaim than Sean Martin. Plays for a Big Ten school, Iowa. It's Y.A. Black. And it took me a while to figure out that you pronounce it Y.A. I had a little help from a couple of publications. But this guy also has the tools, 35-inch arms, huge hands. He's not – the interesting thing is that Sean Martin ran in the 4.88 in the 40-yard dash. Black doesn't have that kind of speed, but he does have the wingspan and the arm length to be disruptive. Your thoughts? Yeah,
you mentioned it. Size is the first thing you see. Excellent size and length. 6'6", 336, 35-inch arms, huge hands. It shows that to have a quick swim move, a club move, to be able to kind of flash in the holes as a run defender. Can take up space and occupy blockers is what I put down in terms of his strengths. Right, this is a guy that can press blockers with this length. Do some of that two gapping, if you will, and just kind of like be a presence there in the middle of the defensive line. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stiffness in his lower half, right? So, being that guy that gets upfield, and even some inability shows to bend there as well. So, again, lower body stiffness, can get turned and sealed. And when he gets turned, sealed, and pinned, because of that, some of that, inability in terms of his lack of athletic ability in his lower half, can't really get away from them, can't spin off it, or can't come back into the play. He's pretty much done and taken out. So for me, I put him down as more of a 3-4 defensive end, maybe a 5 technique. A guy, a team like maybe like the Ravens or teams that are heavy 3-4, that like those big physical defensive ends, could Steelers, something like that, where they could kind of utilize him there. But yeah, for me, in terms of, he's got the size, he's got the length, but just doesn't have the athletic ability I think that they want up front. And no bend as well. So I think that's why he would not be a fit. As of right now, he's just a guy that occupies blockers and could be someone that could just be a big presence in the middle of the defensive line, but not someone that really I could see right now, at least, being that one of those guys that gets after the quarterback and becomes, provides pressure from a defensive tackle position.
Yeah, one of the things, and I'm forgetting who said that, but the thought really stuck in my mind is that with the way that defenses are playing now, the offenses have come up with ways to beat these shell defenses, and that's by running the ball. And
Mhm.
so now it's on the defensive coordinators' shoulders. It's ping pong, always ping pongs back and forth. Now it's on the defensive coordinators to come up with a way to still play the shell, but stop the run. And the solution could be these big, wide bodied defensive tackles who are just going to eat up space. But if they can move and they can help stop the run, then that will allow these shell defenses to continue to dominate NFL defenses and minimizing the offensive team's run game despite that, because now there's big bodies that can either make the tackle or allow the linebackers enough time to come in and make the tackle.
You said right there is the linebackers. If you have guys like this up front that are going to occupy blockers, now you need linebackers. Remember, famously, Dick Duran ran that type of defense, similar to what you're talking about right now, right? With those big guys, Ted Washington and I'm 94. I'm driving a blank. The interception return for a touchdown against the Jacksonville.
Oh my
What's
gosh, what's his
I
name?
know.
He's rumbling, bumbling, and stumbling.
Yeah.
Keith
Oh my
Traylor,
gosh.
Ted Washington.
Keith Traylor. Thank you so much. Keith Traylor. There you go. But yeah, that's what, and now, but you have an Urlacher and a Briggs, guys like that can go after so that's where like a Jalen Walker, I've been talking about a kid like Jalen Walker, or even Jahad Campbell, the kid from Alabama. Those are the kind of linebackers you would want to be able to kind of run and behind those guys and go after the running back or whatnot and make plays in the backfield. So, it's funny because defenses, offenses, they're all cyclical, right? We saw, the change from the lighter defensive linemen to now they can drop back and be more in terms of, zone and get after the passing game. But then now the passing game came back and said, oh, let's run this ball down these guys' throat. Now they're going to come back around with the bigger defensive linemen. So yeah, that's what you need. If you're going to run that type of guys up front, you're going to need faster, more athletic, more agile linebackers, which the Bears currently don't really have.
Exactly. Great stuff. Okay, I've been collecting a few questions that I want to get to. And then to close the show, I want to talk about the signing of TJ Edwards. And I got a hypothetical trade scenario that I presented on last night's show that I want to get your thoughts off. So I brought it tonight. And by the way, happy birthday to your son. He celebrated his 11th birthday yesterday? 12.
Yeah, he was 12 yesterday. Yeah.
Excellent. You guys went out to dinner and had a good time?
Yeah. And asked him if, Rory wants to do a party. He's like, I don't want a party, I just want money. He's smart. He's getting into he's big time into Madden now. So he's all into the whole football stuff, and now he's big into the whole scouting stuff, and he's gonna watch the draft with me next week. So yeah, so he's getting into it. So it's rubbing off on him.
I love it. That's the way it should be. Mutual interest between father and child. All right, so first question comes from Antonio. Danny, what would be your reaction if Ryan Poles drafted Nolan at 10, the controversial defensive tackle?
I wouldn't hate it, Antonio. I would not hate it. I think Walter Nolan is a guy that's a perfect three technique for this scheme. He's a guy that we talked about similar with Shamar Stewart in terms of what he did down at the Senior Bowl. Walter Nolan was also very, very impressive, unblockable, if you will, on one-on-ones. He's a guy that gets dinged for some of the inconsistencies, and you see some of that on tape. There's been talk about maybe a lack of love for the game or desire, but I mean, I just put on his tape, and again, this kid is ultra quick first step. He's a up the field gap penetrator. A little underweight in terms of under 300 pounds. Maybe you want him a little bit over 300 pounds, but I think he's a guy for me is a definite up the field gap penetrating disruptor that can get back into the backfield. The consistencies on tape are something that you do see. It's not something you can hide from. And that's where the draft process and the interviews and all that stuff is going to come into effect. And, has he answered those questions where the Bears feel satisfied and they can trust the kid, making him the 10th overall pick. But in terms of talent, in terms of, being worthy of that 10th pick, in terms of filling an immediate need, I think Walter Nolan would be a nice selection there. Now, obviously, I prefer if you could trade down a little bit, maybe get a 3rd round pick or something like that move back a couple of spots and still get him if you could. But if you feel like he's going to be gone by the time, wherever if there's even an offer, who knows if there's an offer for that 10th pick. If not, if you feel like he's a guy that's going to be a perfect fit, it's a position of need. I don't think it's too big of a reach at 10. I would be okay with it.
Excellent. All right. So where am I? There I am. All right. Let me get to our second question. J2K wants to know, actually, I've updated this one. He's updated it. Danny, what do you think of my sleepers? Wide receiver Torrey Horton, running back Montrell Johnson, and tight end Joshua Simon.
So Torrey Horton, I believe that's a TCU receiver. J2K. I have receivers. The second half of the list coming up here. Let me take a look. I think he's on my list to do in the next batch, if I'm not mistaken. Torrey Horton. 1 second. I'm going to pull up my my Excel spreadsheet here. I know I saw his name come up on my
Colorado State. J2K says.
Colorado State. Okay, no. So yeah, no, I haven't done him yet. J2K, but yeah, definitely a guy who intrigues me. 6'2.5", 196. Decent arm length at 30.5/8. Ran a 4.4 140 with a 153 10-yard split. Again, 37.5-inch vertical gives you some of that, that big play potential there. So he's a guy that I'm going to be doing here in my next batch because I was going through all the big names and all the guys that fit. Now I'm going to start going through some of these guys that are, if you want, sleepers or guys that are potentially day 3 guys where you can find. And obviously DK was one of them, and we covered Thornton and Isaac Tesla. And in the video I posted last night as well, or this morning too. So they're definitely, I'm definitely looking at these receivers in day 3, and I think that's where they're going to attack that position. I still feel that is a position of need, right? Receiver is still a position of need. Obviously bringing in some of the couple of free agents they signed, but I just think they haven't filled that need, at least to my satisfaction. So I think they will still attack it, whether it's a big body possession guy like a like a Nick Nash, or is it a speedy guy, maybe like a Tesla where he's a guy that can run out of slot, or even like a Jordan Watkins, who's another guy that I like a lot too out of Ole Miss. So, but definitely going to look at that receiver position more in depth in terms of day 3 guys here coming forward.
What about, did you talk about Montrell Johnson, the running back?
I've not looked at Montrell. That's a kid from Florida. I have not looked at him yet either, a running back.
Okay, and Joshua Simon.
Right.
So you'll get to work on him. Yeah. All right. What do you think about what Cliff's asked here, Danny? With the Bears looking at some later round guys with their 30s, are they going for a top 10 special teams group? So I think what he is saying in their top 30, what Cliff is saying in their top 30 visits, it looks like they are going for guys who are special teams, right?
Rashard Smith, the kid from SMU, is one guy that comes to mind. A former receiver converted to running back. He's a guy that I think his value is going to be special teams as a returner at the next level. So I think he's one guy that I know off the top of my head that they've brought in here as a special teams guy. But yeah, I mean, this is where Nick Martin is a linebacker. I think he's a guy that can be a special teams maven. We've talked about him before. The kid from Oklahoma State. He's a hell of an athlete. I think just some tidbits here in terms of his instincts, in terms of maybe some coaching could help him get better. But in the meantime, he's a guy that can come in here, provides that speed element, plays a hell of a with tenacity in terms of on defense. And even watching him when I broke him down last week, he's a guy that gives you some of that edge rushing ability as a linebacker, an undersized linebacker. So I think he's a guy for special teams value. You bring him in here, he could be someone that could be one of those guys on core special teams guys. So yeah, that's what they do with these 30 visits. And I think a lot of people put a lot of attention to these guys with 30 visits, but a lot of times they're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's on some of these guys. And you've heard this term a lot now where people say that the hay's already in the barn with a lot of these prospects, right? You've already gone through the tape. You've gone through the scouting. The scouts have come in. I think they were in here a couple of weeks ago. They've talked with the coaching staff. The staff knows what they like and who they like and what not. So these 30 visits, I think a lot of them are kind of blown out of proportion. But for most part, it's just kind of crossing your T's, dotting your I's. Some of them are just getting some more background information on a player, because you never know, that player could be cut 2 years from now, and he may be available on the waiver wire, and they want to get some more of that, see where this player's at in terms of some of the background stuff. So that's what a lot of these 30 visits are. I think I heard might even been Ryan Poles even say where where a lot of times, like, with the combine, you have like a certain amount of time, and then the all-star games, you have a certain amount of time. Can you catch these guys? You might not be able to get all their information or get as much information as you like. So you bring them in for a 30 visit, and then just get as much time as you need to kind of, again, fill all the blanks and make sure you have everything, what you need in terms of, the player. A lot of times there's just background stuff too. You may have heard something, the area scout may have heard something from, one of the school, lunch ladies or teachers or whatnot. And they want to, confirm it, because you don't want to bring in a guy here that maybe no one else has heard of in terms of some off the field stuff, good or bad, right? And you want to just bring them in here and confirm some of that stuff. So, these top 30 visits, some are consequential, some are just really just fortifying all the information you have here before you head into the draft.
Muck asks, does Danny think impact defensive linemen like Scorton and Harmon will drop to the second round?
Yeah, Muck, if you saw my mock 1.0, I had those guys going in that area there, so I definitely think would be great. Now Harmon, you're starting to hear a little bit more buzz about him in terms of bottom of the first round, because he's a talented guy in terms of ability to play multiple schemes, whether he's a 3-4, 5 technique, or he's a interior defensive tackle. We'll see how happens there. But Harmon, you're hearing a lot of buzz now in the first round. But again, we'll see it. But Nick Scoren is a guy I've got my eye on, especially if the Bears do not get an edge guy in the first round. Some might say defensive tackle might be more important or more of a pressing need for the Bears, right, than edge, and that could be something where, I could agree there too. So either one of those players I think would fit a need for the Bears, whether it's Harmon or even Nick Scoren. But even like a guy we talked about earlier, Darius Alexander is a guy that could come up there as well in terms of second round area where you see a guy that's got potential. I know the age thing is something that JP brought up, but I think that could be a guy that can fits the profile in terms of size, length, and ability to get upfield and be a gap penetrating force in the middle of that defensive line.
Fizzo asks, Danny, with this new no-nonsense coaching staff, do you think they might gamble on some off-the-field issue guys who have tremendous upside?
Interesting. That's a good question. I haven't thought about that, Joe. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I guess it all depends on terms of what the issue is, right? Is it a speeding ticket? Is it like some of the stuff that Isaiah Bond, the Texas receiver, is dealing with right now? Things you have to fish through and have a good feel for, right? So. Is it it all kind of depends on in terms of what the issue is, what the off the field stuff is, how talented is the player, how big of a, where are you taking him in the draft? Is he one of your 5th round picks? Is he a 6th round pick? And then at that case, if he's so talented and the only reason that he's available is because of the outfield stuff, how bad was it, right? And do you have all the information? We just talked about the 30 visits, right? Getting all your information, all your ducks lined up in a row there. So it all depends, but. We think there are going to be a hard-nosed, strict coaching staff, but until they actually prove it to us, we'll have to, kind of let's see them. Everything sounds good. Let's see them prove it. Remember, Eberflus was talking about hits principle and get your running shoes, or because we're going to make you guys run and all this stuff, blah blah blah. And within a year, the defensive coordinator was gone, the running backs coach was gone, and the whole all hope broke loose in the locker room. So. Everything sounds good with Ben Johnson. I like everything I've heard so far. Let's have them prove it before we can claim that they're a no nonsense type of coaching staff.
Yeah, I always think that when it comes down to these guys who have had some questionable activities or whatever in the past, a lot of your decision making should relate to how did they respond when you talk to them about it. So you had this issue with the law. Tell me what happened, and I must urge you, because we've gotten a number of different stories. It's important that you're honest with us. And if you detect that they're lying, or you detect that they have not taken accountability for the allegation, or that they don't present themselves in a way that makes you trust them, right, and hands off, and of course there are zero tolerance issues. If you've been accused of sexual misconduct and there's good evidence to provide that, in no way we want to join the team.
Right. So, that's the thing. Like, look, some of these guys, I'm sorry, although some of these like prognosticators are like, they first of all, they mock like Mike, Green, the kid from Marshall to the Bears. And I'm like, okay, first of all, he's not a scheme fit. We just talked about it earlier with JP. But, the off the field stuff, there's a couple of different accusations, different schools about off the field that the McCaskies just will not allow that in their organization. So, like, again, some of these national guys, they may not, dig down and deep. And that's why us that follow the Bears know, this team and know what the ownership likes, know what this defensive coordinator likes, know what this coaching staff likes so far from what we've seen and we've dug into them. Like, just some of these things that they say on national TV just makes me nuts. It drives me crazy.
I hear you. Well, you mentioned Mike Green. Chris, 76 South wants to know, is Mike Green a top 30 player?
A top 30 player. Yeah, he's a top 30 player. I think, assuming, again, all the stuff that, allegation that teams are comfortable with it, he's given, like Aldo just said, he's given them the facts and they believe him, the truth, and all is good. Yeah, I think he's a top 30 player. I think he's a better scheme fit for some other teams than he is for the Bears. So I think, he goes definitely top 30.
Chris even goes as far as to say that he thinks he's better than Abdul Carter. Would you?
I wouldn't go that far, Chris. I mean, they're both similar types of players in terms of, twitchy, edge defenders that can get after the quarterback. But I mean, just Abdul Carter, and again, I hate saying this comparison because they both wear the same number, but like the Micah Parsons comparison really rings true with Abdul Carter for me, at least, in terms of his ankle flexion, his ability to convert speed to power, to get after the quarterback, to be a difference maker in terms of the, run defense and a pass rusher as well, and the ability to play. Remember, he started his career at Penn State as an off-ball linebacker as well, just like Micah Parsons did. So the biggest thing concerns me, Abdul Carter, is can he maintain the pounding at the next level, right? Especially if you're going to be a down in, down out edge guy at the NFL level. You're already talking about he's dealing with a stress fracture in his foot. He had a bad shoulder injury that kind of limited his ability to play at full strength towards the end of the last season with Penn State. So if these nicks and bumps are starting now in college, what's going to happen when you're a full-time defensive end or a player that's around the line of scrimmage? That's the only real concern for me. If he can bypass that stuff, I think this guy has got really good to great potential, right? And then I think him and Travis Hunter for me are the if you want to call can't miss prospects. I think for me, Hunter would be a receiver. I know some scouts, some teams like him as a cornerback. I just like his ability as a receiver and what he could provide there in terms of the ways you can scheme him up. Now, he's not a perfect receiver. You might have to scheme him and get him open and get him off some press coverage early on until he gets bulkier and stronger. But that's where I'd use him in terms of offensive. But I think Hunter and Abdul Carter are two really can't miss players for me in this draft.
Last question goes to Antonio. With Johnson has a head coach now, with Ben Johnson now the head coach, do you think Ryan Poles feels pressure to draft offensive players, or if Poles wants a defensive player, who's going to win that argument? We won't know.
I'm letting you know right now. I've said this before, and you can take us to the bank. This is Ben Johnson's team, right? Ryan Poles will get whatever player Ben Johnson wants. If Ben Johnson says, I want player X, Y, and Z, Ryan Poles is going to do whatever he can to get player X, Y, and Z. If you're talking, or I'm assuming we're talking about the draft here. If it comes to a position where scouts and Poles says, I want this player, or I think this player is worthy of this pick, and if Ben Johnson and his staff says, no, let's go with this guy, Ben Johnson's going to win that argument. For me, it's as simple as just follow the money. Ben Johnson makes $13 million. We don't know how much Ryan Poles makes. I'm assuming it's much less than $13 million. So I think Ben Johnson was the jewel of this offseason in terms of getting him here from Detroit. Ryan Poles is going to work with him. Ryan Poles is going to, I think Ryan Poles feels a little reinvigorated and just a little more confident because he's now not having to justify drafting players for this coach who has really no input offensively, what's going on, has no plan in terms of what to do offensively, gives everything to his offensive coordinator inexperienced offensive coordinator that he hires. And he's trying to fit players into this guy's, offensive scheme. So, I think now he's got someone that has a vision in terms of Ben Johnson, has a staff that knows what kind of players they want and what they need. And I think Ryan Poles says, all right, this is easy for me. Now, as a scout, I know what I'm looking for, and I know what kind of players to bring in and what kind of players my coaching staff likes. So I think Ryan Poles is a little more invigorated. I think that monkey's off his back a little bit. I think you can see a little more freer, a little more, a little more relaxed Ryan Poles. I think so. All the media sessions that I've seen, I think he's a more relaxed, more comfortable, because I think instead of trying to be a part-time coach, scheme fit players and all that stuff. I think he's just, he's looking. He has a criteria in terms of what he wants or what the coaching staff wants. He's just going and he's kind of picking off the list. All right, this guy fits it. Bam, bam, bam. And gives it to the coaching staff, and the coaching says, "All right, yeah, we want him. Nope, we don't want him either." So I think it's going to be it's going to be a nice marriage. We'll obviously, proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what happens on the football field, but I think this is going to be a good combination.
All right. So last night on Bare Their Souls, I presented this hypothetical situation, and it got really good, positive response from many of the people in the chat. Want to get that's not the one. Let's try this one. So what if the New York Giants have drafted Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick of the first round? They want to team him up with Shedeur Sanders because, of course, they both played at Colorado together. So they called the Bears, and they say, you would say yes to this? Why?
Yes. This is what I hope happens, to be honest with you. This is what I hope happens. I hope whether it's the Giants or whoever picks Travis Hunter, whether it's the Browns, they say, you know what, we want to get Shedeur Sanders, and we want to be able to, now you would think that they would want to get it before the Saints, like 8, 7 or something like that. Right. So that's where they're probably, aiming for, because they're afraid the Saints might take Shedeur Sanders. But if this offer comes to the Bears, I mean, if you put it back up real quick, I've got the rest of it. Yeah. So I want to see the complete haul they get, because what happens here, the Bears, I believe, drop out of the first round completely, right? Mm-hmm. If you put up
it's coming right now. Stand by.
So the Bears.
Oops. God damn it.
The Bears drop out of the first round, which is fine because they get the second pick in the second round. Now they have 3 second-round picks.
Mm-hmm.
That's not
it. That's not it. Let's try that one. Okay, sorry.
So they get 3 second-round picks, and you get I believe a 3rd-round pick in that scenario, and you get a first and another pick next year. I think that now you have 2 first-round picks next year. I think now with the Bears, you have 3. Yeah, there you go. You have the 2026 first and a 2026 third. You have a 2025 second and a third. So you have 3 second-round picks. Now you can sit there and wait, because remember, I told you the strength of this draft is mid of this first round to about the end of the 3rd or beginning of the 4th round. That's where a lot of these guys, that's the strength of this draft, right? So the more picks you have there, the better. And being armed now with 3 second-round picks, being armed with 2 third-round picks, if a player, for example, say Josh Conley Jr. or Walter Nolan or something like that is falling in the first round, you have the ammunition, if you want, to go back into the bottom half of the first round and get that player at a better value, right? So I think this if this scenario comes up, I'm all over it. If I'm Ryan Poles in the Chicago Bears, yes, I drop out of the first round, which is a lot of people don't want. But again, 3 second-round picks, 3 high second-round picks, you can get your defensive tackle, you can get your edge guy, you can get your tight end, you can get your running back, whatever you want, because that's where the run's going to start happening with some of these good players. So yes, I couldn't say yes fast enough to this scenario.
Yeah, you're basically, I agree with everything you said. You're basically acquiring 3 starters within your second round, and 2 potential starters in the 3rd round, and you're probably getting 2 more starters in addition to your draft picks. So like 4 starters in 2026.
And now you have ammunition if you want to go back into the bottom half of the first round and get a player that's falling. You got the ammunition there as well. So that's always also another scenario too you can play with. Yeah.
I like the deal. A lot of people in the chat were very appreciative. So let's call the GM for the Giants and push them to making that deal. That
I have a feeling the Giants are targeting Jalen Milroe from Alabama. I think
in the second round, right?
Yeah, second round. Maybe come back into the bottom half of the first round and get him, because I think, if you go back in terms of Brian Daboll, what he's done, like he made his bread and butter working with Josh Allen. And what was Josh Allen's biggest thing? He was a big, athletic, quarterback who's got a big arm. Just accuracy was his issue, and he worked with him, right? He worked with him and developed. I'm not saying Milroe's going to be a starter next year for the Giants. Obviously, they got Russell Wilson there, but I think there's a guy that he's going to develop. He's got the athletic ability to be able to use his legs. again, big arm. Just got to work on some of the mechanics, got to work on some of the processing issues, and you let him sit for a year, maybe a year and a half, who knows? But I think that's the way how Brian Daboll can go ahead and fix his or save his job, I should say. And now you can get a Travis Hunter if you want in that scenario in the first round, or Abdul Carter, and now you can have your defense lead and have a Russell Wilson, more of like that bridge quarterback, to kind of take care of you, help you win some games, and again help Daboll keep his job moving forward.
Yeah. J2K said that Jalen Milroe was invited to the green room at the draft. Do we really think he sits on that? Yeah, he's probably going to go a lot higher than people think. That's a good point.
I mean, typically they want those guys going in the first round. I mean, we have seen some guys sit, right? We've seen obviously Will Levis sit, go into the second round. We've seen the safety from Brian Branch from the Rams from Alabama. He sat. He was taken in the second round. So we've seen some green room invites sit, but typically the NFL wants to get it, as close as accurate as possible. So the fact that Milroe was invited, that tells me he's going late first or early second.
Yeah. Indeed. All right. So to close the show, I want to get your thoughts on the signing of TJ Edwards. It was announced today that Chicago Bears have extended the contract of TJ Edwards. It's a $20 million contract. So he'll get $10 million a year. 13 million of that is guaranteed. It's probably front loaded so that if he has a disappointing season in 2025, they can probably release him in his second year of the contract without too much damage to the salary cap. The question for you is, did you see any drop off in TJ Edwards' play last season? Because that's been a point of contention for a lot of Bears fans, complaining about the signing, saying he lost a step next season, blah, blah, blah. And some of the defenders of TJ Edwards are saying he was playing for one of the worst defenses, a dysfunctional team with the defensive coordinators and blah, blah, blah. What are your thoughts about the signing? And do you think TJ Edwards has lost anything?
So first of all, TJ Edwards was never really that great of an athlete in terms of as a linebacker. I mean, he's more of a guy that's smarter, right? He's a cerebral player. He's a guy that keys and reads and is in the right place at the right time. So I think he never really won with his athleticism. I think it signifies, and a lot of talk was once Dallas Allen was hired was could Edwards be the guy out because he's not as athletic? And I was like that's crazy because Edwards was, in my opinion, the best linebacker on the Bears last two seasons, right? And so for me, no, I think if anything, and and I obviously I didn't hear this news up until now, the resigning. I think that's a great move personally. I think he's a good player. I think he's a great leader on this team, homegrown kid. And I think this, for me, signifies a possibility you kick him inside to middle linebacker, and Tremaine Edmonds could be the guy that's exited out, and you bring in another linebacker. And that's where my dream scenario is Jalen Walker is that number 10 pick if he's there at number 10. And I think you kick Edwards inside a middle linebacker, you make Walker your strong side linebacker, and again you go from there. So that's what that for those the first thought that kind of rung to my head was Edwards kind of kicks inside the middle linebacker, and now you get rid of Tremaine Edmonds, because I think that's a guy that, to me, it's been a wasted signing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I am intrigued by the possibility of what Dennis Allen can do with Tremaine, because he does like to pressure the quarterback. He'll have the linebackers blitzing more often than what Eberflus did. And so he might let the linebackers go, and maybe Tremaine needs that. Maybe we can unleash some more aggression. I also am hoping that from a technique standpoint, they teach him to better disengage blocks, because that's been my biggest problem with Tremaine Edmonds. Seems like when, particularly, in the run game, when you see a running back getting a handoff out of the backfield, when that offensive lineman attaches himself to Tremaine Edmonds, he cannot disengage and make tackles. It's like, if he doesn't have a clear path to the ball carrier, he's useless. And maybe that's just me, but I am intrigued by, a new coaching staff and new scheme coming in here, and perhaps we can salvage Edmonds, because he's still a young player. He's 26, 27? He's entering the prime of his career. So
is he that young? I thought he was like in the well, like late 20s.
Let me check because I
Yeah.
know he was one of the youngest guys drafted.
Coming out of Virginia Tech. I mean, he was in the same draft with Roquan Smith, and that's and maybe you might say
26 years old.
okay
26,
26. Oh,
yeah.
okay, right, okay. So yeah, he's entered the prime of his career, and I think and for me, he's not even a good blitzer in my opinion. Although and because a couple times they send him on a blitzes and he just gets blocked up. So I think even that portion of it is not really his strength, right? His biggest thing, and this is what Eberflus said was his ability to drop back in coverage and be that that big kind of presence in the middle because of his size and his length. But he didn't even. I guess he had an okay first season with the Bears, but that never really kind of came to fruition in terms of what they were envisioning, what they were selling when they brought him in and let Roquan, who's still making all pro teams and Pro Bowls, with the Ravens go. So that really kind of still sticks with me in terms of some of that decision making there. But again, hopefully that's all in the past. But yeah, this Edwards signing, curious to see what that is, because I know that they want to get faster and quicker at linebacker, and the guy for me, again, I'm going to be harping on this guy for a long time is Jalen Walker. If he's there, oh, man, that is one guy that I feel so confident that he's going to be a successful NFL player at this next level is Jalen Walker.
What do you think about what J2K says here? He says that Flus wanted Edmonds to stay in his gap and move laterally. Allen will gap attack, and there's no more waiting, and that might work better for Tremaine Edmonds. Your
right.
thoughts?
I mean, yeah, J2K, you're right. I mean, the whole system, it's all about being disciplined, staying in your gap, and playing to your responsibility. So, we've seen Tremaine Edmonds. I've seen him with Buffalo before he got here, and now with the Bears. I mean, he's a guy that piles up a lot of tackle numbers, but the sideline stuff is nowhere near to what Roquan was, right, in terms of his playmaking ability. Could it be better in terms of filling the gap and being a little more physical at the line of scrimmage? Sure, we'll see that. But I'm just curious in terms of how they're going to utilize him. Will they get the best out of him? Like I said, 26 years old, which is a little bit shocking to me. I thought he was much older than that. But yeah,
27 in early May.
Yeah, you're right. He entered, I think it was 20 or 19 when he entered the draft out of Virginia Tech. So that makes sense now. But yeah, hopefully they get something out of him, because I mean, I think they have another year or a year and a half of guaranteed money on his contract. So
one more year
there. But yeah, I mean, if they can get something better out of him than what they've had in the past couple of years, hey, more power to them. And that's only going to make the defense better. But in order to get him better, you got to get the defensive tackles to be better too. So
right. Yeah, it's all holistic, complementary football type of stuff. All right, Danny, great job. Great job by our guest, Joseph Acosta over at SB Nation. JP is an annual guest with us. We got to have him on more often. I really enjoy the talks you two guys have. And Danny, what's coming up next for your YouTube channel? Let me put it up on the screen here at Shimon Draft Scout. What's coming up there?
Yeah, so what we got going on, guys, is obviously I got safeties up right now. I got Ransom from Ohio State coming up, and I've got a sinker from Virginia coming up in terms of his tape. I'm looking at Makuba from Texas as well. I think those are the kind of safety range we're looking at here, and also going to start going back now. I'm going to go back, start looking at some of the players that might have kind of like passed by initially, whether offensive, defensive linemen. So if there's anyone you guys want. I know JTK, you mentioned a couple of players today. I'm gonna look at. I'm not sure if I'll do a video on them, but I will probably talk about them. In the next draft on tap we have next week. So tune in for that, please. And JTK is always there. The other thing, I mock draft, my final mock draft. Aldo and I will be producing that in the coming days, and that will be posted next week, probably the Wednesday before our next draft on tap, and to look for that. So that's going to be my final mock draft. That's coming out there as well. So obviously more videos, my final mock draft before the draft. And also I know last week, a couple of guys were talking about, or asking about some t-shirts. I do have a t-shirt, one that's available. If anybody in the chat is interested in the shirt, please submit your name to Aldo. Aldo, you want to give them your contact information there in terms of where they can.
Absolutely. You can send me your information. If you are on X, send it to @Barroom Network, and you just leave me a DM, direct message, or if you would prefer to send me an email, send it to let's call it, let's do this account, Aldo Barkeeper at gmail.com. Let me put that up on the screen so it's easier for everyone.
So whoever's interested in the shirt, put your name in with Aldo, and if it's 1, 2, 3, it's 10, whatever, how many people ask for a shirt, we'll put your name in a bag, and we'll pull out the winner, and we'll announce it next week's show who gets the t-shirt. So appreciate all the support. Appreciate everyone who's asked about getting a t-shirt. So what I can do is just hopefully give this back to the people. And again, if you're interested in a t-shirt, submit your name. We'll put it in a hat, and we'll announce the lucky winner next week, and we'll get that shirt out to you.
Yeah, sounds good. And our schedule next week is we're going to be loaded with draft shows. On Monday morning, it'll be Gabriel Talks Football. I think he has Dan Pompey, Hall of Fame pro football writer, on as his guest.
Excellent guest.
Yeah. On Tuesday, Bare Their Souls, Johnny Santucci and I will do our last show before the draft. On Wednesday, it'll be Draft on Tap. Danny and I will go through his final mock draft of the season, and we're working on bringing in a special guest for that show. And then on Thursday, the day of the draft, Danny and I are back with Draft on Tap, and we'll be on the air for the entire first round, talking about the prospects going, getting everyone in the chat room involved, potentially bringing in a couple of special guests. On Friday, we'll do the same thing. We're not sure if we're going to go the entire night. We'll kind of get a feel for the night, but we will begin our broadcast right as at the time that the draft starts at 6 p.m. Central on Friday night. And then on Saturday, we're going to have kind of a potpourri all-day coverage with multiple barroom show hosts coming in, hosting the show, having guests and so forth, and just having, a beer and draft talk on Saturday. So we are loaded with contact. And then after that, then the following week, well, we'll tell you about that schedule when we come to it. Danny, great job tonight, brother.
Yeah, this is like I've said it multiple times. This is my Christmas, guys. This is where we get to unwrap some of these gifts and see what happens here. So I would love to see what the reaction is after the Bears make the draft. Obviously, we hope everyone jumps on and participates and gives us your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent, right? So, if the trade that Aldo just put up there with the Giants happens, I will be ecstatic, because I think that's going to be a hell of a deal, because now you have ammunition in the sweet spot of this draft, and you have picks for next year. And like I said earlier, if you want to come back into the first round because someone's dropping like a rock, you can do that as well. So I would love that kind of scenario.
And the Cleveland Browns, I used the New York Giants there as an example, but the Cleveland Browns, they could trade their first pick of the second round.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to drag this on. I know it's late, but if you think about it, that makes more sense for Cleveland, right? Because Cleveland, if you look at they're pretty much dead right now. I mean, the fan base is disinterested. But you take a Travis Hunter at number 2, you come back and you get Shedeur at 10 for in this example. Now you got that buzz going in Cleveland again, right? Because what are you gonna sell him? Joe Flacco, as your starting quarterback, and then a $40 million a year defensive end in Myles Garrett. Right. No, now you got some buzz here. Now you got Shedeur Sanders coming. You got Travis Hunter coming. Now all of a sudden, next thing you know, if there's a losing streak in the season, next thing you know, are they going to bring Prime here? Is he going to come here, coach Travis Hunter and his son? All that stuff's going to start bubbling up in Cleveland. And that's where they're going to start talking about, excitement. And if you're an owner, Jimmy Haslam, it was evident that him and Dion were talking for a long time at that Colorado showcase. So I'm not saying anything's planned or anything like that, but just I could see Cleveland doing something like that to kind of regenerate the buzz of their fan base and kind of rejuvenate that fan base. That right now is kind of like saying, wait, Joe Flacco is going to be our starting quarterback. I know he took us to the playoffs a couple years ago, but Joe Flacco is our starting quarterback.
Yeah, that can't be. All right, good way to close the show. Again, make sure you hit the thumbs up, share the broadcast, leave a comment if you're watching on demand, and let people know what we're doing here over at the Barroom Network, just having some fun and talking football with some very knowledgeable football analysts.
You're right. In case you missed, the show, and if or you're looking for a couple days later or whatever, it's always also if you go to Shimon Draft Scout, go under live, and you'll have the recording there as well. You can watch it there as well. So multiple different ways you can get to this recording after the show's been posted.
Exactly. All right. For
Get your
Danny
names
Shim,
in to Aldo if you want a shirt.
that's right. Let me
Although
put it
you
up
don't wear
there.
your shirt tonight. I forgot. You
You
don't
know
wear your
what?
shirt.
I wore it. When was it? The last taping we did on Monday. I wore it then, and then I threw it in the hamper. It's not. My wife hasn't washed it yet. It's the
Okay.
nice thing about the fact that she's retired now. She does laundry like every 2 or 3 days. So, but not in time for the show tonight. Sorry about that.
Why can't you do laundry? Men can do laundry too, Aldo.
Yeah, you know what? I've managed to talk my way out of that. I'm getting away with murder. I love that girl.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
must be happier now since she retired. I can notice that.
Yeah, I am. Although, the weird thing is so we don't have her income anymore because she retired, but she's spending more money than ever before. We're remodeling the first floor of the entire house. And so she comes to me, like this was 2 or 3 weeks ago. She comes to me with, what she's thinking about spending. And I go, oh, okay, that's a lot, but you're not mad? I go, well, how can I be mad? We saved up to have this stuff. And so, and then I turned my face and I rolled my eyes. Holy shit, that much money to redo fucking kitchen that to me looks fine. So,
yeah, I've seen your kitchen. It's nice. I like the kitchen.
yeah, it's fine. But, it's time. If she wants to do it, it's fine by me. All right. For Danny Shim, I'm Aldo Gandia. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.